Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Namikaze Minato is rescued from an ambush by a Naruto part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. This cannot be happening. Namikaze Minato thought as he found himself perfectly immobile by what seemed to be poison. The young ANBU captain and his team were returning after a S-rank mission. It had consisted of an assassination of some high-powered businessman that had managed to somehow get some information on Konoha's defense. The mission was successful until they were ambushed by some missing nin. They wore no headbands, so he could not tell which hidden village they originated from, and they hid their faces by some masks. Due to chakra exhaustion and the element of surprise, his team were killed, but they took most of their enemies with them. Soon only Minato remained and 2 other missing nin. He was about to move for the final strike when he found his entire body not listening to his commands. Thus, he fell to the floor paralyzed. This was when he felt the pinch of a saban on his neck. He tried to assess the situation. He could feel, but he couldn't move a single muscle. He thought he was going to die, but it seemed that fate was too cruel and wouldn't even allow that. Such a waste to just kill you now, let's have some fun, one nin said, taking off his ANBU mask. Minato could feel his heart hammering against his chest as the 2 nin tore at his already ripped clothes. He knew the protocol to follow upon sexual assault, but no training had ever mentioned or prepared them for the humiliation that one would experience in this situation. Rule number 25, he chanted in his head. He was not going to give them the pleasure of reacting. He could feel everything. He could hear everything. He could see everything. Rule number 25. Those rough hands, they tugged, pulled, pinched. They burned against his skin. Rule number 25. The 2 tongues as they licked bit sucked. He felt dirty. Rule number 25. Those 2 faces burned themselves into his memory. He could hear the moans and groans that made his stomach churn. If he wasn't paralyzed, he would have thrown up. He could feel the tears prickling his eyes. That was odd, he had tear ducts. Rule number 25. He closed his eyes. He will not break here. Not now, not ever. But there is a limit for everyone. He felt himself being roughly placed into another sexual position. This one was more embarrassing than the last. Earlier he was placed in a sitting down position with his legs spread open. Now he was kneeling with his ass up and face firmly placed on the floor like some common submissive whore. Now isn't that a sight? Minato let out a silent scream. Now it's rude, Konoha-kun, that you aren't hard, after all the attention we gave you. Gave to me? You forced it on me. Well, that doesn't matter. By the time we finish with you, you'll be coming and still be rock hard. And that's when the prodding began. Minato winced inwardly as he felt a finger shoved into him. His heart was ramming into his chest. Maybe, he thought, it'll burst and I'll die and escape this torture. Then he felt the now fingers leave him and something much larger poke at his opening. He panicked. He tried to move, but he couldn't even scream. He couldn't do anything but squeeze his eyes shut as he felt tears leak out. He waited, but the pain didn't come. Was this some new form of torture that fate had given him? Slowing everything down, making it much worse? Then suddenly he felt warm liquid on his bare body. He thought it was a release of one of his attackers when the scent hit him, the familiar coppery odor that had been his constant companion since the day he became Chunin. When he opened his eyes, he saw the head of one of his attackers separated from his body, his blood staining the forest grass. His body was drenched in blood, hinting that the other nin was dead too. Minato strained his eyes trying to search for the new arrival, but he couldn't feel any chakra or hear anything. Then a black cloth fell onto the floor, spread out, and he felt himself being lifted and carried out of the embarrassing position gently, then placed on the cloth. After the blood rush, his eyes were still focusing and he drew a sharp breath. Easy, I will not harm you. A low warm baritone greeted him, the voice making him relax. It reminded him of the Sandaime, and had the quality of a Hokage, calm and soothing. When his eyes focused, he was greeted by the sight of a man. He must have been his age or older. He had tan skin and spiky blonde hair very much like his own, but it was longer and brushed the joint of his neck and his shoulders. He was heavily built and seemed the heavy combat type. But then again, he had stealth and could hide his chakra extremely well. He looked at the shinobi's face and took in the well-defined cheekbones and strong jaw. He was clean-shaven and was sporting 3 strange pairs of whisker-like scars on either side of his cheeks. But what really caught his attention was the shinobi's eyes. They were the color of his own, but more intense. They had a richer coloring that seemed to glow, and held a hint of purple. I will not harm you, the shinobi repeated, locking his intense gaze with his. Suddenly Minato felt warm, protected like nothing in the world could harm him. But he blinked away those feelings and forced himself to feel caution. While holding the gaze, he felt the cloth being wrapped tightly around his body, covering him. Warily, Minato felt around for the nin's chakra. It was different, free, alive and powerful. He could feel it pulsing and flowing. Minato had never come across anything like this in his short life in Konoha or anywhere else before. Even the Hokage's chakra wasn't like this powerful, yes, but not alive. That was when he realized that the ninja was bathing him in his chakra. This was used by Jounin senseis on their genin teams to wash away the after effect of their first-time exposure to killing intent. The shinobi was using it to wash away the feeling of shock and to remove the effects of chakra exhaustion. It was effective, save for the fact that the technique cost a lot of chakra, but by judging by the look of the shinobi he didn't seem to notice. There are more shinobi arriving from IWA and heading this way. He spoke slowly and looked directly at Minato, before picking him up and jumping away from the area. Minato looked at the blonde again. They were traveling at high speed and the man didn't seem to be showing any signs of fatigue or slowing down. Looking at the sun, they seemed to be traveling towards Konoha, and it was evening. It was night when the shinobi stopped at a small stream that ran by a cliff. He was placed down near the stream and the shinobi spoke. The poison's effect should be over by now. How did he know? Minato thought, looking at him, as his plan to fake paralysis so he could let the shinobi underestimate him went out of the window. By doing so he could easily overwhelm him using the element of surprise and find out what he wanted that way. The shinobi smiled at his confused look, which he cursed for letting appear on his face. He saw him take out a scroll and release something. It was a pile of shinobi clothes. Sorry if they are a little too loose, the shinobi said, before he bowed and turned away towards the cliff wall. Minato felt a surge of panic flood his system at the thought of this shinobi leaving him. Why? Why was he feeling like this? Shouldn't he be relived? He didn't understand. But those thoughts and feeling were calmed down at the words. I'm going to set up camp. I won't be far, just in there. And he pointed to a random section of the cliff wall. Minato watched him walk towards it and then disappear behind it. That's when he realized that the rock walls overlapped each other, creating a natural hideout and defense. How did he know about it, not us? They were now in Fire Country and half a day's trip from Konoha. Shaking his head, he classified those thoughts as ask later and did a chakra scan of the area. Satisfied that no one was around, began to strip, wrinkling his nose in disgust at the smell. The other blonde was awfully polite not to comment on it, and just subtly hint to have a wash. He was covered in dried blood, saliva and who knows what other fluids. The wounds from his attack were now inflamed and swollen. There were handprints on his chest and hips. He must look like Jiraiya-sensei after being dealt with Tsunade-sama. Smiling slightly at the thought, he got into the stream. The blood came off, but not the grime or the feeling that he was filthy. Sighing, he reached for the pile of clothes the shinobi had left him. When he pulled up the shirt, a small travel bar of scentless shinobi soap fell onto the grass. Letting a grateful smile appear on his face at the thoughtfulness of the other blonde shinobi, he returned to his washing. Once he was satisfied he was clean, Minato dressed in the borrowed clothes. They were a size or two big like the shinobi had said, but not baggy. They also held the same scent of the other blonde. He couldn't describe it, but it was similar to the wind on top of the Hokage monument. Where had that come from? He blushed at that thought and shook his head. Unbelievable, the Hokage's most trusted ANBU acting like a genin rank kunoichi was just unbelievable. Still disturbed at his own thoughts, he walked towards the section of the cliff that he saw the other blonde disappear behind. In his arms he carried the now damp cloak which he had washed in the stream with the remaining soap. Treading cautiously and expecting an attack, he entered the cave through the hidden entrance. One could not be too careful after all. The sheer size of the cave took him aback. The cave was larger than what he had imagined it to be, much larger. The inner walls had a glossy surface which reflected the light from the small fire, lighting the entire cave dimly. There were 2 sleeping bags by the fire, and he spotted the blonde sitting on a flat rock prodding the fire lazily. Thank you, Minato said, handing the damp cloak to the blonde, but it still needs to dry. Leave it on one of those flat rocks, he said, gesturing to the one near the fire. Then getting up, I'm gonna have a wash. And walked towards the exit. Minato sat near the fire, warming himself. The shinobi hadn't left anything around to investigate, save for the sleeping bags, and he checked those for traps, seals and poisons. He searched the cave for anything that could lead to any harm. Only a genjutsu to hide them, and some seals that would alert them if anyone other than them stepped within 10 feet of them. Minato did an assessment on the ninja. Skill-wise, he was a strong shinobi, definitely above Jounin. He was very skilled in sealing and had high chakra reserves but possibly only moderate chakra control due to the genjutsu, which was not powerful. Personality-wise he seemed friendly, but one never knows. Minato's musing was cut short when he saw the other blonde arrive. He was dressed in new attire, and his hair was still damp, or at least he assumed so as it was less spiky. Sitting across from each other, they ate ration bars in silence, watching the flames dance lazily. Then Minato broke the silence. "What do you want from me or Konoha?" No better way of asking than straight. The shinobi looked at him in surprise and then amusement before replying, "Nothing." Minato shot him a look of "I don't believe you." The shinobi laughed, "Yeah, it's pretty hard to believe." "Then why did you help me do all of this and head towards Konoha? You seem to be in a tight spot and I have hero complex. I also want to join Konoha." "Why?" The shinobi smiled, but this time it was sad, tired, as if he had seen the endless fighting and was sick of it. "That I cannot tell you, it's something only the Hokage should know." Minato stared at him, to see if there were any hints to his secret. "May I know your name?" The shinobi snapped out of his depression and slapped his forehead. Sorry about that, I completely forgot, my name is Naruto." He grinned. Minato couldn't help but smile back. "Yours?" Naruto asked. Minato sent him a questioning glance. Most shinobis knew who he was due to his reputation in the bingo books. So he carefully answered, "Minato." "Namikaze Minato?" Minato nodded, so the blonde knew, or at least had heard of him. "So you're the bastard that everyone keeps mistaking me for?" Minato was stumped. He didn't expect that. He was ready for all fear, hostility, worshipping, or no reaction at all, even a smug reply on how the great Namikaze Minato got into such a humiliating position and had to get rescued like some damsel in distress. But instead he got good-natured laughing and calling him a bastard. "Do you know how much of trouble I got into because of you?" Naruto continued chuckling. "Now I know why Iwa Nines attacked me on sight and rabid women tried to jump me a lot." Minato couldn't help it. He broke out chuckling. The mental image was too funny to resist, and the infectious laughter from the other end didn't help either. But he did notice the similarity between him and the other blonde, the same coloring for one. The main difference was that Naruto was heavier built and taller, while he was leaner. He would never admit it, but Minato had a more effeminate look in comparison to Naruto. "I'm sorry for the inconveniences you had to face," Minato said in an amused tone. "Nah, I don't mind it much. Just there is a limit and women don't understand that." Minato chuckled. "Do you have family name, Naruto-san?" Minato could practically feel the mood drop. "Yeah, I do, but I choose not to use it anymore." "Why?" He had to get some information. He got no answer but the same sad smile. Naruto didn't even look at him. He seemed to be gazing off into the fire, but Minato knew that Naruto wasn't even here. He knew that look. He had seen in it upon so many fellow shinobis' faces when they were looking at the memorial stone. To Minato that look told him enough. This was a shinobi who had lost everything and wanted nothing but to start a new life. The want to join a village and choice of not using the family name were the hints he needed. Minato secretly admired the blonde for the mental and emotional strength to pick oneself up and move on after everything you knew, believed in, and lived for had been taken away from you. "You've lost your village." It sounded so blunt. Naruto's eyes widened for a fraction of a second and his head snapped towards Minato in surprise. Then he let out an uncharacteristically sad sigh of defeat and went back to poking the fire. That was Minato's answer. He watched as the shinobi poked the flames. His grip was so tight that his entire hand was white, and his jaw was clenched so hard Minato could practically hear the teeth being grounded. His eyes seemed narrowed to slits and his other hand was clenched into a fist, and his entire body seemed to be trembling with anger, but he was still sad. Minato blinked at the realization. Naruto was feeling guilty. Only one person in an entire village would feel guilt of that level, at the destruction of their village. Yorikaga. "Okay. Enough talk for one night, see you in the morning? Don't bother with the shift, taking the seals are enough. Good night." And he picked the nearest sleeping bag and fell asleep with his back facing the fire and Minato. The obvious attempt at changing the subject and abrupt ending told him two things. 1. He hit the nail on the head, and 2. He seemed to have inherited Jiraiya's lack of tact at stating something bad. Severely regretting ignoring the other blonde's wishes to not speak about the matter, he stood up, bowed and said, "Forgive me, I shouldn't have." He was cut off before he could finish. It's fine. Just go to bed. Minato winced at the tone. It wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either. He knew that he had crossed the line. Cursing his stupidity and big mouth, he crawled into his sleeping bag and gave one last look at the other figure before falling asleep. The next day, a little past noon, the blonde duo had arrived at the gates of Konoha. Minato glanced at Naruto out of the corner of his eye. Was this a good idea? To let an unknown shinobi of Kage level into their village was purely illogical and insane. But then again, they would need all the help they could get and all the allies they could make, for they were a few steps away from war unleashing with IWA. The shinobi was a seal master. He had large chakra reserves and a possibility an encyclopedia of powerful ninjutsu. Having him on their side would certainly tip the scales to their favor. After they cleared the necessary paperwork, the two went to the Hokage residence where Naruto requested an audience, and Minato had to submit a mission report and brief the Sandaime about the meeting with Naruto. After the briefing, Minato glanced hesitantly at the door, knowing that once he let the blonde in, there was no going back. He normally would just let the shinobi go through the standard procedure that consisted of an appointment with Konoha's torture and interrogation force and an extensive background check to declare him safe, and only then he would be greeted by the Hokage. The interrogator had informed him that there was no intent of causing harm to Konoha, but anything related to his background the shinobi was very vague or didn't answer at all, instead replying that only the Hokage is allowed to know that information. In short, he failed the screening. When Naruto entered the room, he felt a wave of nostalgia flood his entire system. The old man seemed to be eternal in his mind. The only difference was he looked a lot less tired, unburdened and younger, obviously, for he was about 29 years in the past. But the air around him remained the same. The grandfatherly but regal atmosphere was nothing but a bittersweet memory. Hokage-sama, I would like to have a word in private. Sarutobi waved off his secretary and Minato leaped out of the window. But Naruto smiled when he felt his father's chakra join the other three entities hidden in the room. He really didn't have to be NBU to know that they were in the room. Ever since he was a baby, he knew that they were hidden in the room, even though he couldn't sense their chakra then. Now he had to applaud them, especially his father's, for managing to practically erase their chakra signatures. He chuckled. If he hadn't trained to since birth to sense chakra signature, he would have missed them. In private, Hokage-sama, he repeated, quite amused, when he saw Gigi's face flicker in surprise, then suspicion, and the slight flare of all four chakra signature above him. Sarutobi looked over the man again. One would scream that this Naruto character and Minato were clones at first glance. But a closer look would tell you they had to be related. Due to the report given by Minato, Sarutobi decided to give the man the benefit of doubt, and if he could convince the by-the-rule ANBU Captain Prodigy, he had to be telling some truth. So he prayed that he placed his faith in the correct decision and activated the silencing seals. Naruto smiled when he saw the old man activate the silencing seals. The seals could block out all sound that came from either of them and blurred the lips of the speakers within the area, so lip readers were at a loss on what was being said. The old Hokage looked at him to begin the conversation. Grinning, he flopped down into the chair which was opposite the Hokage's desk. Bachan got rid of it, evil old hag, and began. My name is Uzumaki Naruto, but only very much later I found out it was Namikaze Naruto. The Sandaime took a long breath from his trusty pipe. So you are related to Namikaze Taishu? Yeah. How? Father and son. The Sandaime blinked and Naruto sighed. Sandaime Hokage, it is a pleasure to meet you again. I'm the Nanadaime Hokage. Breath, Gigi, breath. Prove it. Naruto grinned again. This was one of the reasons he loved the old man. Always level-headed and seemed that nothing could faze him. That was before the sexy jutsu came into creation, of course. Where is your crystal ball, Gigi? Sandaime eyebrow rose and Naruto grinned. Sighing, he unsealed the wanted object. Naruto took the crystal into his right palm and stretched out his arm. The Sandaime's other eyebrow joined the already raised one. It was a guarded secret that viewing crystal ball was also used to share memories. Placing his right palm on top of it, the clear crystal which turned black obsidian, he closed his eyes. Sarutobi opened his eyes and he was greeted of the sight of himself, only older. His older self was teaching him to read a children's story book. What kind of relationship did he have with this shinobi? It seemed to be grandparent-grandchild, from the way the man addressed him and the memory. Scene changed. He was standing on top of a pole that overlooked the village. He took in the surrounding. Nothing seemed to have changed, but his eyes widened when he saw the Hokage monument. There was a large gash across his face, and 2 more heads were carved into it as well. The 4th looked like Minato and the 5th looked like Tsunade. Scene changed. He was being yelled at by Tsunade, who didn't seem to have aged a single bit. He saw a familiar tuft of gravity-defying silver hair, and he heard the name Hatake Kakashi being directed to the man. He chuckled, so this was Tsukumo's brat all grown up. Then he felt a large hand ruffle his hair. Looking up, he saw his perverted student, Jiraiya. He then heard the man call him his student. The scene changed again. He was walking up the stair to the rooftop of the Hokage residence. He could hear the cries of the people, calling him to come out. He heard the name Namikaze Naruto, and he walked to the railing. He saw the entire population, both civilian and shinobi, cheer for him. Looking at the building, he frowned. Everything was new. All the infrastructure didn't seem to be even a year old. Then everything faded to black. He opened his eyes and he saw Naruto spinning the crystal ball on his index finger, looking bored. He took another long breath from his pipe, savoring the tobacco. So, Tsunade became Hokage? Pretty much, yeah? He resealed the crystal. With a hench. Women's vanity. They both let out a chuckle. Then Sarutobi took another puff from his pipe. Looking serious, he spoke. Minato says you lost your village? Yeah. How did that happen? A series of events. Sarutobi looked at him, which meant explain. One from the Renegade, one from Uchiha Madara, and finally one from a revenge-driven idiotic teammate of mine. The pipe clattered to the floor. Madara is dead. And Jiraiya is gay. Picking up his pipe, so what do you plan to do? Make sure that it never happens. Sounds tedious. Never had it any other way. Sarutobi went back puffing his pipe, and Naruto was inspecting his fingernails. He studied the Sandaime, who had an amused glint in his eye which led to the feeling as if impending doom had been thrust upon his being. So you'll be staying here? Sandaime broke the silence, refilling his pipe. That the plan? You'll need a new identity. I'll keep my given name. Readjusting to anything else would be too hard, and I cannot blow my cover, but clan name is no-go. Think of some name not from shinobi ancestry. Kazama. Good name. Kazama Naruto, got a nice ring to it. Fill the paperwork. Also, what rank do you want? Jounin-sensei, always wanted to teach a bunch of brats. Why not go for apprenticeship? Still get to teach some brats and less chance of getting your cover blown. Kids these days are very curious. Another glint. You're planning something, isn't you, old man? No, I'm not, just looking out for you. I don't believe you. Not my problem, I'm Hokage now. So you do as I say. Hypocrite. Naruto coughed out, didn't you preach to me about how not to abuse power? So I'll classify all your origins under SS rank secret? Good choice. How are you related to Kushina? Mother, where is she? Hospital. The QB disappeared and she is very weak and has to adjust with it not being in her. Good thing she didn't have it sealed in her until she was a child, otherwise she wouldn't have survived the sudden disappearance. So I'm guessing it is in you. Yeah, Fuzzy is in me, sleepy and tired. That also SS rank? Please. The Sandaime deactivated the silencing seals and summoned the secretary to submit the paperwork in. Welcome to Konoha, Kazama-san. We hope that having you here will augment the strength we already have. Thank you, Hokage-sama, I hope so too. You better, otherwise I'll have you kicked out for being incompetent. How rude. You were a Kage. Deal with it. Naruto laughed and got up to leave. Just as he was going to leave the Hokage's office, he realized. GG, where am I going to stay? 27 seconds. What? It took you 27 seconds to figure out that I didn't give you any accommodation. How in 5 nations did a gaki like you become Kage? Even more so, at the age of 20? Naruto mumbled something, looking at the floor as if he was kicking some imaginary dust. Sarutobi looked at the disgruntled blonde. He read the paperwork, and found out the shinobi's age was 20. Prodigy or Tsunade was being irresponsible again and pass over the paperwork for booze. Looking at the ever-growing pile on the left of his desk, he really didn't blame her. What was that? He asked. I became Kage at 18, GG. Naruto answered, acting like a disgruntled child. Meanwhile, a certain ANBU captain in the roof of the Hokage's office was acting like fish out of water, sending a small prayer to Kami for the little things in life like the masks the ANBU had to wear. Kage at 18? His mind screeched. Sure, he was 17, and he made captaincy, just a few weeks after his birthday. But this was plain ridiculous. Even his team was irked as well. Minato evaluated the man again. Nothing seemed to make sense. There were so many questions. How did he know about the crystal ball? Only the Hokage's personal ANBU protection squad and students knew about it. What did the Hokage see that made him trust this man to completely relax in this man's presence? Minato knew that the Sandaime never relaxed, save for Jiraiya-sensei, Tsunade-sama and his family. How is this man so familiar with the Hokage that they address each other so casually? Gaki and Gigi? Seriously. Mentally shaking his head, he continued to watch the scene below between the professor and the blonde enigma. Gigi, not there. It sounds like a crappy place to live in, Naruto whined. The third applauded at the subtle hint. Gaki. Stop complaining. You don't have probation, be grateful for what you have. Sarutobi snapped, throwing a paperweight at him, which Naruto effectively caught before it hit his head. The paperweight and his head have been good friends during Bachan's office reign, and placed it back on the pile of papers. Then an evil grin appeared on his face. Gigi. What? How about a deal? Sandaime eyed him wearily. He wasn't Tsunade, but he wasn't a good one either. Naruto taking the silence as a yes and continued, you give me a good place to live and I tell you how to do paperwork without having to actually do it. Fine, Kitsune. The Hokage called out, his eyes never leaving Naruto's. Naruto glanced at the ANBU that appeared in front of him. Recognizing the familiar mop of blonde hair and chakra, he had only one thought running through his head. I wish Kyuubi could see this right now. Naruto Sandaime's voice snapped him out of his amused thoughts. Namikaze Minato, live in an apartment complex that has one flat free. Kitsune will take you there. Naruto nodded. Now out with it, Gaki. Gigi, one little technique called shadow clone. He replied cheekily and grabbed the ANBU by the waist and jumped out of the window. They were followed by a very frustrated scream and the paperweight, which Naruto caught. Again. Landing on the rooftop of one of nearby building, he placed the ANBU down. Then looked at the Hokage window and commented. All those years as Hokage and he didn't figure that out. Throwing the paperweight back and got a scroll thrown back in return, which held the kanji for Gaki. ANBU Captain Namikaze Minato didn't speak. Mainly due to the fact he couldn't trust his voice. That brief moment he was carried out by the blonde shinobi, he could practically feel the warmth of the other shinobi radiated and the well-defined hard-toned muscle through the navy blue long-sleeved turtleneck sweater. And the blood returned to his face again. What is this? He mentally screamed. Why was he so flustered with this shinobi? His musing was cut short when he was startled by a pair of blue eyes peering through the holes of his ANBU mask into his own. Blushing once more, he took a small step back. Is anybody in there? Naruto called, tapping the forehead of the mask with his finger. Yes. Minato grounded out. Don't tell me you're pissed that I manhandled you out of the Hokage's window. Look, I'm sorry, but would you rather have been facing the Hokage's wrath? Trust me, I know I won't. Dealing with disgruntled old Kages are my area of expertise. This way, Kazama-san, and Minato jumped. Lead the way, Kitsune-chan, Naruto called out, and got a kunai thrown in his direction as his response. Catching it, he followed the ANBU. Feisty, I like him that way, he chuckled, unaware on how red the blonde captain became in response to the comment made. Instead, the only visible reaction he got was a hail of shurikens. Blocking them all with the kunai, he mumbled, what is it with throwing stuff at the new shinobi, some hospitality you guys have. They arrived at a large complex. It wasn't fancy or large, but it was new, clean, spacious and well maintained. It was 1,000,000 times better than his old place, but then again anything was better than his old place. Entering the 4-story building, Naruto saw Minato speak with the landlord. There were a total of 9 apartments. Apartment 1 was on ground floor and then it goes up in 2s. When the ANBU finished, he followed Blonde up the flight of stairs. When they reached the top level, Minato handed him the key. He was in apartment number 9. Why do I feel like this number is following me? Thank you, Minato nodded and left. Opening the door, he inspected the place. 2 bedrooms with a bathroom each. Living room and kitchen were connected with a countertop. He had a balcony, a room for the washing machine and private area to hang out his laundry. The floor was tiled white and the walls were colored white as well. Once he gets his hands on a bucket of paint, he was color it orange. But all round it was a nice place to live in, just too clean. Only thing left to do was to inhabit it. Opening the scroll Gigi gave him, he found out that the old man bought him the apartment, so no rent, given him some cash for furnishing and informed him that he had a week to settle in before he was called in for active duty. Sighing, he burnt the scroll. He hated being in debt to anyone. Naruto brought most of his personal belongings with him, and he brought some cash as well. Guess he had to pay back the old man slowly. He walked out of his apartment and locked his door. He glanced at his neighbor's door. Wonder what kind of person he or she is, hopefully good and easy to get along with. That's when his eyes fell on the nameplate. Namikaze Minato. Shit, Fuzzy is not gonna like this. Naruto spent his week doing exactly what he planned to do. He bought the necessary furniture, clothes, equipment, cutlery, and crockery. He painted one wall in his living/kitchen room and his bedroom a burnt autumn orange to remove the whiteness. While dressed in black shinobi pants and rust-colored long-sleeved t-shirt, he went shopping for a week's groceries, quite happy with his 7-day holiday. While a certain captain following him was not. Namikaze Minato was far from happy. He had practically stalked the man's every waking moment, and used the Kage Bunshin to keep an eye on him during the time he was asleep. And still he found nothing. Absolutely nothing. Flashback. After he had dropped the blonde shinobi at his new residence, he returned to the office. Upon his return, the Sandaime motioned for him to come near him. Kitsune, I'm sure you want to know about Kazama-san? Minato nodded. Well, can't tell you a lot of it since most of his past and origins are SS ranked. Minato's eyes widened. SS rank secrets means that only the Hokage will know them. But I can tell you this, to put your mind at ease. The Sandaime paused, as if contemplating whether or not to tell him. He is Jiraiya's student. Minato's eyes widened. Sensei took another student? I would like you to summon a messenger toad, because I need Jiraiya's presence to confirm he is of no threat to Konoha and loyal. The Sandaime cut in before he could ask any questions. Hi, Hokage-sama, and he summoned Kosuke. Hiya, boss. The young toad waved at Minato. Kosuke, I need to deliver this to Jiraiya immediately. Say it's urgent. If he asks for the priority level of this summoning, say that Tsunade is giving birth to his child. The Hokage gave a scroll to the young red toad. Righto. And the summon poofed. Also, the Sandaime continued looking at Minato. I read your report. I won't be sending you out for some time. You need time to grieve for your comrades and overcome the shock of your incident. Sarutobi added mentally. Minato didn't reply vocally, but his presence became agitated, signaling he received and understood the inaudible input as well. On that note, you mentioned that you went through the protocol to get the shinobi screened, but you didn't talk about the visiting the hospital or a medic need. There was no time, Hokage-sama, for the shinobi's screening took a longer time than average, and he was adamant for an immediate audience with you. The Hokage inwardly cringed. The teen sounded so detached and apathetic. You could have gone when he was being screened. Yes, Hokage-sama, but I didn't sustain life-threatening injuries and this was Kage-level ninja, so I chose to stay with the INT to certify no threat would affect Konoha. The boy answer was so monotonous, like it didn't matter, as if it was everyday passing event. The Sandaime pinched the bridge of his nose. How, why, and what made Jiraiya teach someone so logical, obedient, and law-abiding? His student was the direct opposite of the blonde in front of him. Standing up, Sandaime walked to the window with his back turned to the captain. Putting those matters aside, I have another mission. The old Hokage continued. It's more of a personal mission. He paused for a moment looking at the village. I know you don't believe that Kazama-san is loyal or not dangerous. So I want you to observe him for this week. I gave him a week to settle down and relax. Also, I told him that he has no probation, which means his guard should be down. Minato nodded and was about to begin his task immediately when the Sandaime spoke. I want you to know, I order you to go to hospital and get yourself examined before you begin this mission. He nodded in response again and flickered out. Flashback end. Minato sighed heavily as he half-heartedly followed the man home, watching as the man waved back at the elderly and children he passed by. Minato found out from his week of shadowing the blonde was that Kazama Naruto was an extremely optimistic, happy-go-lucky, likable person, who seemed genuine with his actions, and there was something about him made people drawn towards him. The type of person Jiraiya-sensei would like to train. The teen watched as Naruto interacted animatedly with an elderly couple. He frowned at this. He remembered when the shinobi first interacted with any civilian. At first he almost seemed startled by the hospitality of the shopkeeper or vendors and surprised at the smiles the civilian greeted him with. Interesting. As Minato followed the blonde to his apartment, he mulled over how he interacted with Naruto. He didn't understand why he was so expressive with other shinobi. Earlier, when he first met the blonde in conversation in the cave, he thought it was just the after effects of the event that make him so open, but the very next day when they arrived to Konoha, he couldn't think of a logical reason. What made him act that way towards him? After dropping the groceries at his apartment, Naruto went for a stroll. It was late afternoon, and he had some time to kill. He mentally sighed when he felt his constant companion. Honestly, what was it going to take to convince the teen that he was loyal? He knew his father was many things, but the paranoia was news to him. He unsurprisingly found himself in the third training ground. Mainly out of habit from his previous life. Glancing at the stumps, he smiled sadly at the memories they brought. Lazily, he walked towards a memorial stone, and at each he took closer towards the stone, the shinobi's chakra signature was becoming more and more easy to detect. When he reached the foot of the stone, he noticed that the amount of names on the slab was significantly less. Hopefully he could keep it that way in the future. Then his eyes caught sight of 2 new inscriptions on the monument, and spoke. "These are your teammates, aren't they?" He felt the shinobi's chakra flare significantly. "Why not come and talk to them?" "You knew I was there the whole time." He saw Minato appear behind him in an offensive stance. His right hand held a kunai. "You became noticeable when I approached the memorial stone," he answered coolly, keeping a calm expression while he looked at the masked shinobi. When Naruto saw Minato relax the grip of his kunai, he turned back the stone. "You know, we had one of these in my village, and my Jounin sensei was known for being late for any sort of meeting. When my teammate and I got fed up of yelling at him for being late, we began to investigate it and found him spending his time talking to it. It was his form of grieving and receiving closure." "Why is he telling me this?" Minato wondered as he watched the blonde speak. By mistake he opened his mouth and... "A true ninja should never show emotion," came a bitter reply. Naruto blinked. His father was a rule-abiding, well-behaved shinobi? And he was disappointed that he couldn't be the perfect ninja. Something was so dearly wrong here. "Wrong," Naruto spoke out, using a little more force in his voice than intended. It was Minato's turn to blink, but the rules state. "You are wrong," Naruto repeated, cutting him off. He ran his hand through his hair in frustration. How was he going to get this message across? True, rules and regulations are important to stop us going wild and to increase the success rate of a mission, he admitted grudgingly after calming down, but don't follow them to the letter or take them literally. They are there to guide you, not to rule you. Bend them to fit the situation so you can handle and adjust to it. Not the other way around. "That's just idealistic," Minato commented. "Well, you forget that idealism made me Kage at 18, remember? I'd like to see where you are at that age," Naruto shot back. Minato remained silent. Naruto turned around to face him personally. "I always believed that rules would never make me a true ninja. So I found my own way, to never give up." He walked towards Minato, who didn't move, and placed a hand slowly on his shoulder, which the teen flinched involuntarily in response at the contact. But Naruto didn't remove his hand. "We shinobi have to learn to control our emotions. We shouldn't get rid of them. It's part of being human. Emotions form bonds, and those bonds help us become strong. They give us something to fight for, something to cherish, something to protect." Looking at the stone, a friend once told me, when a person has something important they want to protect, that's when they can become truly strong. Then he turned back at Minato. "Cherish the bonds you have and remember the one you had. That's their legacy." He gestured to the memorial stone and continued, "So stop trying to be the perfect ninja and instead try being a true one." Looking away, "Also don't go bottling everything up, cause it's not going to help. We all have a limit, and when you reach that edge you're gonna break, everyone does. My advice to you, let it all out, you'll find it easier to deal with it." He cryptically finished taking his hand off the other blonde's shoulder. He walked away from the stone, leaving the other shinobi in his thoughts. He didn't have to turn around to know that the teen was now on his knees, letting out a string of strangled sobs in front of the memorial stone. Naruto cast a genjutsu to ensure no one would see the prodigious ANBU captain at his weakest, and left the training ground to give the shinobi some privacy. Just as he stepped out of the training grounds, a kunoichi who looked around his age wearing a chunin vest greeted him. He didn't recognize brown-eyed brunette who had tied her hair in neat bun, but there was something so familiar about her. So he pegged her as one of the ninjas who were killed in the war or the Kyuubi attack. "Kazama-san?" she asked hesitantly. "Yes?" he replied gently and gave her his usual sunny grin. Cheeks tinted pink, she smiled back and spoke confidently, "The Hokage wants you at the office, now." "Thank you," he trailed off, looking at her expectantly. The kunoichi blushed in embarrassment, and answered hurriedly, bowing in apology, "Yumino Jin, Kazama-san." Now he recognized her. This was Irika's mom. Wow, what a coincidence. Please call me Naruto. Kazama sounds old. Actually, it sounds strange. Only if you call me Jean. She shot back. It's a pleasure to meet you, Jean-san. He grinned cheekily. She reminded him a bit of Irika-sensei. Walk with me? He asked, gesturing towards the Hokage residence. Nodding, she followed him. The two continued at a lazy pace in silence. Naruto let a tiny smile grace his lips. He felt closure to surrogate father through this woman. You're quite adept in knowing your way through Konoha for someone new, Naruto-san. Jean voiced out, breaking the momentary peace. Well, I did have week off. So I pretty much figured out how to get from place to place. He answered lazily. Just then one child from a group of 6-year-olds playing a combination of hide and seek and tag bumped into Naruto. Hey, watch it, kiddo. When you're running, look at what you're running towards, not away. He chuckled, ruffling his spiky brown hair. Sorry, Ninja and I-san. The boy rang out. Name's Naruto, kid. Nice to meet you, Naru, and I'm Marino Ibiki. He answered happily before shooting off again, leaving one shocked blonde ninja in the dust. That was Scarhead? Naruto blinked rapidly, trying to get over the fact he met the most talented head of the ANBU interrogation unit just a few moments ago. With hair? Do you have children, Naruto-san? Jean asked, breaking Naruto from his momentary disbelief. No, why do you ask? Looking surprised, then asked, how about you, Jean-san? If he calculated correctly, Irika-sensei should be around too. She laughed at his surprised expression and answered, just, since you seem to be good with kids. Naruto smiled at her answer, and yes, I do, a son. She let out a small smile in pride. Really? Naruto mused out. Yeah, he is currently at the daycare, because his father is on a mission and I teach at the academy and work part-time at the Hokage's office. Naruto smiled. It explained her lack of caution around him, and what she said. Dealing with children all the time made her see the good in people and knack for reading people's intention. Just like Irika-sensei. What's his name? He asked, even though he knew the answer. Irika, she said, having the same look of pride any parent would have upon their child. That's a good name. He commented, then said, hope I can meet him soon. Matter of fact, you can. The daycare is just there. She pointed to a brightly colored house a few feet away from them. Then her mood sank a bit, but your meeting with the Hokage, she trailed off. He can wait, he replied. He wanted to see his favorite teacher again, even if he was a child. They walked into the building and Jean spoke energetically with some of the caretakers before running out of sight, leaving Naruto at the entrance. She came back carrying a small child with wild brown hair which was brought up into a small spiky ponytail. Hi, are you-chan? This is Naruto-san. He is a new ninja, but strong one. Say hello? Jean spoke to him. Hello, Naru-san. The child greeted joyfully. Naruto smiled back, but this time it seemed strained. It's a pleasure to meet you too, Irika, he said, looking into wide chocolate eyes. Chocolate brown eyes looked at him intently. They were full of pain and weariness. But they told him something silently. Don't you dare think of giving up. Naruto could feel the thick, warm, coppery liquid slowly begin to soak his cloths as he held the grievously injured shinobi in his arms. A portion of his left side of his chest was missing. Ripped out. Burned away. In the background he could hear the sound of chirping and screams. Flashes of lighting appearing from the battlefield illuminated the two men. I love you, Naruto, my son. The man rasped out, and his chocolate orbs flutter open one last time before closing. The blood was warm, but the body was cold. Are you okay, Naruto-san? Jean's voice cut in, bringing him back to reality. Naruto blinked, his eyes resting on Irika in Jin's arms. Letting a grateful smile, he answered, yeah, I'm fine. Are you sure? You seem to have seen a ghost just a few moments ago. I've been calling your name for a while now, but you didn't answer. She pressed on worriedly. Irika's expression mimicked hers. Naru-san not well? No. He laughed, rubbing the back of his neck nervously, grinning madly, and then said, it's just Irika-chan here, reminded me a lot of someone I once knew. Then looking at her directly in the eye, he said determinedly, Jean-san, I promise you, I will protect this child life with my own. Jean was going to say something when she heard her name, and Irika's being called from the distance. Turning around, she saw her husband running towards her. Hiroshi! To-san! The mother and son cried out in return. When she turned her head back to face Naruto, she found herself alone. Who was the blonde? Hiroshi asked her, when he came close enough to take their struggling son out of her arms. Naruto let out a heavy breath as he leaned against the wall in a dark alley. He was just few blocks away from the Hokage's office, and he needed some time to regain his composure. He didn't expect meeting Iruka-sensei would shake him that much. "Damn you, Sasuke!" he hissed out, slamming his fist into the wall behind him. He was too angry to feel the tears run down his face. Upon entering the office, he saw the old man Hokage sitting behind the desk smoking his pipe, but what made him attentive was the other entity leaning against the windowsill of the office. It was Jiraiya. It took all his willpower not to leap across the office and embrace the man. There were so many different emotions flowing through his being. Sadness for his death. Anger, at him for dying and at himself for letting the old perverted bastard die. Fear that he might not be able to be his student again. But one emotion dominated them all: happiness. Pure undiluted happiness. Thus he allowed a huge grin that nearly split his face to emerge. "Walking towards the Hokage, you called Gigi?" On that note, Jiraiya let out a bark of laughter. Naruto studied the man. Indeed, he was younger, one could say, from his face and build. His spiky white hair was shorter, and the red markings were thinner than when he first met the perverted sage. There was also an air of confidence, power, and vigor. This was Jiraiya Toad Sage at his prime. "So this is the Gaki you were talking about?" An amused voice cut in. "The name's Kazama Naruto, Erosenin." The Sandaime let out a bark of laughter. "We both know that's not true, Gaki." Naruto shot a glance at the silencing seals. Once seeing they were activated, he continued looking at the Hokage. "So he knows everything, I presume?" The Sandaime nodded. "And he needs proof?" The Hokage nodded again. "Crystal ball, Gigi." "I don't want proof that way." Jiraiya cut in before the Hokage went to unseal the crystal ball from its scroll. "I want you to prove you are my student my way, Gaki." Looking intently at Naruto. Naruto allowed his grin to turn predatory. He was itching for a fight, and he seemed like he was going to get one. So he casually asked, "Training Ground 7? Meet you in 5. Jiraiya answered and flickered out, and Naruto followed a second after. "Kids." The Sandaime grumbled, deactivating the silencing seals, and informed his secretary that he would be out for a while. In exactly 5 minutes, 3 people appeared in Training Ground 7. This training ground was the furthest from the village and next to the Hokage monument. It was commonly used by shinobi if they were practicing high-ranked ninjutsu, and the Hokage's permission was needed to enter or use the training area, giving them privacy and secrecy for their spar. The ground had all the requirements and was similar in environment to Training Ground 3. There was a stream, trees, and a flat plain. Sandaime sitting on one of the stumps near the entrance of forest area gave the limitation of the match. Taijutsu predominantly, kenjutsu, genjutsu, senjutsu, and ninjutsus are allowed, but nothing too destructive. I still want a training ground left at the end of this spar. He stressed the last word to get the message across. While Jiraiya's outfit didn't change, Naruto's did. He now wore ANBU-issued black pants and top with black fingerless gloves and the standard ninja sandals. He also had a sword about the size of a nodachi strapped across his back from right to left with his kunai and shuriken holster. The two shinobi nodded at each other and went into their taijutsu stances. Jiraiya immediately fell into frog kata form without using senjutsu, while Naruto fell into a form either of the men recognized. He had parted both legs, placing his right with his foot facing Jiraiya in front of him, and pushed his left perpendicular to the right, behind him. Then he had placed all the weight on his right leg and bent his entire torso forward over it, while stretching out his left, creating a strange flat-footed lunge. His hands were neither open nor clenched, mimicking an animal's clawed paws. They were positioned, his right in front half stretched and his left the opposite, as if to grab something from behind. Since we don't want this fight to last forever, there will be a time limit. Does 15 minutes sound alright? Sandaime asked. Please, Gigi, I'll whip this blonde brat's ass under 5. Jiraiya commented, smirking smugly. Don't get ahead of yourself, old man. After all, you're all fart and not shit. Naruto shot back, his face sporting a smirk of his own. Don't play with fire, brat, Jiraiya began dangerously. 10 minutes, the Sandaime cut in before they started the match on their own at the end of the time limit, and if either one is immobilized, it will be a draw. Use only the open area for your spar. Gigi, just start the match. I side with the Gaki on this one. Brats, the Sandaime sighed but announced, begin. Jiraiya shot forward, but realized in time that Naruto was above him, coming down with a heel drop. Blocking that, the two separated. That entire stance hinted nothing aerial, so the opponent would dash forward, coming into the position for the heel drop. The Sandaime thought while smoking, and he continued to watch Naruto's unusual style ingenious and completely unpredictable. This taijutsu seems to be a mixture of styles of incomplete or incorrect forms, and sequence of attacks depends upon improvisation. The hands were half-formed due to the slight advantage of grabbing something faster than an open hand or a closed fist. But then again, most of the stances leave the torso open, meaning then the user either has to dodge or take the hit as defense. Jiraiya and Naruto broke again. Both winded, Jiraiya began to use senjutsu but didn't go on to sage mode, for he would have summoned Shima and Fukasaku to help him balance the nature chakra. Also, that would fall under the category of too destructive. Naruto fell into the same position he began the fight with, only now both his hands were reversed as if to grab something behind him. Jiraiya pulling out a kunai, he went into the frog kata stance. This time it was Naruto's turn to start. Ninja Art, Shadow Clone Technique. While running towards Jiraiya, he made 3 clones to flank either side of him, and they all grabbed the 2 ends of their Nodachi sheath and simultaneously pulled out 2 swords. One was katana and the other was its complementing wakizashi. A daisho. The 2 sparred for a few moments. Jiraiya blocked the swords with his kunai, and Naruto and his clones in turn dodged his punches. After managing to dispel one of Naruto's shadow clones and seeing that hand-to-hand was not working, Jiraiya began making hand seals. Fire release, big flame bullet. Naruto and his remaining clones responded by swiping his shorter sword in a downward motion, creating a wall of water in form of a horseshoe in front of Naruto to protect him from the attack before dispelling. Water release, sword water wall. Using the momentary surprise, Naruto swiped his longer sword horizontally. Wind release, slice. Wind attacks were invisible, and since Naruto swiped his sword horizontally, he created an invisible blade traveling parallel to the earth towards the sage. So Jiraiya rolled flat on the floor until he felt a small shift, the air signaling the danger was over. But when it passed him, it hit the cliff behind him, generating a large explosion, and when the dust settled, a deep, thick wedge was seen, exploiting the distraction the Sannin used. Earth release, swamp of the underworld. Cursing his lack of concentration, Naruto slammed his katana into the ground that didn't turn to mud to keep him from sinking. But he already was caught. Walking towards the blonde shinobi, Jiraiya released his senjutsu. Letting out a breath, he closed his eyes and said, "Good spar, Gaki. You nearly had me a couple of times. Guess I win this match." "No, it's a draw, Erosenin." That when the sage felt a slice on his neck. Opening his eyes, he found Naruto still in the swamp using his katana to keep him from sinking in. But his other hand had his wakizashi pointed at him. The blade had a section of water added to it to increasing the length, and the tip was at his jugular. Water release, water sword. Jiraiya blinked and then grinned, which the blonde returned. Brilliant show of skill, and it's been 7 minutes. A third voice appeared. The two released each other and turned towards the Sandaime. "You have an interesting daisho," the Hokage commented, eyeing the 2 blades. Jiraiya looked at him as well in interest. "My primary affinity is wind, but I can manipulate water just as well. The swords are created to channel the chakra, release it, and manipulate it. I separated the 2 elements into 2 different swords. Holding the katana up, like you noticed, this is Kaze. I only use my wind element with this sword, and most of the time it's the attack sword. Then raising the wakizashi up, and this is Mizu. Like its katana, I use the water element. It's the defense sword, but can be offensive." Jiraiya absently rubbed the flesh wound on his neck. "Interesting, you removed the disadvantages of hand seals and swords but kept the use of them both." Sandaime mused out aloud. Naruto nodded. "Gaki, one more thing." Jiraiya spoke up, "I can understand how you manipulated the wind element, since it's your primary affinity. But how did you use water? We are quite a distance from the stream and your elemental chakra can only do so much. When Mizu channels my chakra, it charges the air around it and condenses the moisture in it." Naruto demonstrated again. This time slowly, showing the gradual build of water around the blade. After the 2 men were satisfied with the explanation, he released water, allowing it to fall on the floor, and he resheathed the 2 swords. The 3 men walked to the forest. Sarutobi went back to the seat of his stump, Jiraiya sat down on a root of a tree with his back against its bark, and Naruto plunked himself on the floor. "You were aware of the extension the nature chakra gives frog kata, also you were familiar with the style. Which means you have mastered sage mode?" Jiraiya looked at Naruto. When he got a nod in return, he let out a smile and said, "Gaki, I accept you as my student." Naruto's eyes widened for a moment, and then lowered his head in a bow from his sitting position to show his gratitude to the older man's statement. Sensei, whip out the crystal ball. Jiraiya called out to the Sandaime. Naruto rose his head and looked at the man in confusion and hurt. What? Jiraiya asked with a smile on his face. I finally get a chance to have a peek into the future, and you think I'm going to just throw it away? Naruto smiled and took the sphere from the Hokage and commented, no good perverted bastard. Jiraiya chuckled in response and placed his hand on top of the orb, turning it black. After a few moments the two broke the connection. Jiraiya looked at Naruto and said, dead last, huh? Naruto grinned in response. Then the Sanin's face turned lecherous and let out a perverted giggle. Glad to see Tsunade's beautiful jugs of milk will grace the office of the Hokages. It seems like there's something to look forward to in the future. Naruto face palmed and Sandaime sighed. Now that everything is in order, I will call a council meeting. The Sandaime cut in, grabbing the other two shinobi's attention. I'll tell them, you are one of Jiraiya's students he trained during his time of running the spy network. You became the Kage of your village, which was destroyed, and sought refuge in your teacher's village. After pausing for a moment, the two nodded in agreement with the older man's story. Which village? Naruto asked. There is an island northeast from Whirlpool Country. So far it's just filled with dangerous wildlife and no human activity. The land is very hilly and filled with a thick forest. Jiraiya suggested, when the Sandaime remained silent. Are you sure you are not making this up? Naruto asked. As far as his geography went, he was sure that there was no such island. Jiraiya threw a rock at him. The Sandaime sighed. He feared the future of his village. Catching at Naruto's side, what is with you people and throwing stuff at me? Ignoring him, Jiraiya continued, so far there is no name given to the island, so come up with a name for it and your village. You want me to lie? Naruto asked. Gaki, Jiraiya pinched the bridge of his nose, sighing, we are ninja. It's kinda what we do around here with this occupation. Yeah, but to my own village? Just come up with a name, so we can tell the council to save us a lot of headaches and paperwork. Sarutobi nodded vigorously at the last part and added. Also, it would make sense, since it's next to you no Kuni, land of hot water, and that's where Minato and his team were ambushed before you intervened. Fine, for the official version then. But I'll never say I came from there. Naruto said, crossing his arms, the thought for a moment. You said it had a lot of trees and hills? He asked. Jiraiya nodded. I'll call it Yamashima, Mountain Island. He paused a moment, and the village I'll call it Marigakyu no Sato, Hidden Forest Village. Jiraiya and Sandaime nodded their heads in approval. When the Sannin clapped his hands, now that is completed, let's move on to why it was destroyed. Civil War, Naruto said. His tone was sharp and final. The older two men looked at him, and then at each other. Now that we have the facts all cleared, let's put it in writing. The Sandaime said, standing up. Jiraiya, I will need your presence to validate it. The Sannin nodded and got up, joining the Hokage to walk towards the entrance of the training ground. It was now early evening. Ero-sennin, Naruto called, when the old man turned, the summoning contract? The man grinned and opened the scroll on the floor. Knock yourself out, kid. Naruto nodded, grinning, and bit his thumb and wrote his name, Namikaze Naruto, on the scroll next to his father's. Oh, before I forget. The Sandaime crouched down, pulling something from his robe. Congratulations. In his hand held a Hittite. Grinning, Naruto picked it from the Hokage's hand. The one Iruka gave him was with him, and sealed. He knew that he couldn't use it anymore, since the serial number was yet to be given out, and it was scratched up, old, and frail. Then he felt something hit his head. It was a scroll. That's your Jonin vest, and I'll be seeing you at my office tomorrow morning at 7:30. Do come on time, there's someone I want you to meet. The Sandaime explained with a glint in his eye and cheerful smile. Naruto suddenly felt his body freeze up. You're planning something, aren't you, old man? The Hokage didn't respond save for his smile, which only became brighter. Laughing, the Sannin, picking up the scroll, gestured to his sensei that they'd better leave the area fast. Nodding in understanding, the two flickered out, leaving Naruto to the summoning. Ninja art, summoning technique. He was not disappointed when he found himself on top of the Toad Boss. Gamabunta, on the other hand, was annoyed that the new summoner managed to bring him out on his first try, but still gave the test to the blonde brat. Stay on his head until sunset. When the last rays of the sun disappeared behind the horizon, the chief stopped jumping around and grudgingly accepted Naruto as a worthy summoner. After the summoning disappeared in a cloud of smoke, Naruto fell back onto the grass of the field and let out a tired sigh. The toad had not gone easy on him, and he suspected that the summoning was trying extra hard to toss him off. But after many verbal battles and jumping about, the toad boss ultimately ended up liking the loud mouth, for Naruto knew that near to the end of the test he could have been thrown off, but the grumpy toad didn't. Looking at the starry sky, Naruto let out a smile. It was so peaceful. There were no screams of pain or shouts of anger. No sounds of jutsus clashing. No blasts from exploding tags being set off. He had been in battle after battle after battle that he had forgotten about what peace felt like. To hear the crickets chirp, to feel grass beneath you, not hard ground or rock, to just close one's eyes without fear of being stabbed. Sighing, he closed his eyes. Let's see what the old man is planning, Naruto thought as he left his apartment balcony and sprung from roof to roof. He had spent the night in Training Ground 7 and had woken up in time for a trip to his apartment, a shower, change of clothes and trip to the Hokage's office. While soaring in the air, he looked at his uniform. He was wearing a burnt orange turtleneck with black long sleeves and his jounin vest over it. He wore standard black shinobi pants and sandals. After checking if he had strapped his daisho to his back, he fingered his hitate. He first thought to wear the forehead protector the way he usually did, but after feeling not right with it, he removed the blue cloth and replaced it with a longer black one which he tied around his pants to act as a belt. All his doubts on his outfit flew out of his mind when a familiar smell hit his nose. He knew that smell anywhere, even in death. It was the smell of ramen. Completely forgetting about his scheduled meeting, he diverted, following his nose. After some tracking which would put the entire Inuzuka clan in shame, he found his pot of gold. Ichiraku ramen. Having a small religious moment, Naruto dashed forward to the stand. Scaring some of the customers, he placed his order. It had been a long time since he had a bowl of ramen, and it had been even longer since he'd had a bowl from Ichiraku. Aji-san, 1 bowl of everything you've got. Coming right up. A voice came from the back. While waiting for his order, he took in his surroundings. The place seemed newer. Apart from that, nothing had changed. The same stools and the same countertop. That's when he saw the notice. It was informing the customers the ramen stand was celebrating its 25th anniversary since its opening, and everything was half price for the next week. In Naruto's words, he could have twice the amount of ramen for the same price. Naruto clapped his hands together, sending a small prayer to the god of ramen, who finally seemed to realize that he was a faithful believer. What are you doing? He heard a voice cut in. What does it look like I'm doing? He answered, going back to praying. When the voice didn't answer, Naruto cracked his eyelid a bit and glanced. It was Minato. Dropping his hands, Naruto greeted him. Good morning, Minato-san. Minato nodded in reply. Naruto looked at him. One could say he had spent the night in the training grounds as well. His hair was messed up and his clothes seemed ruffled. The shinobi's eyes were rimmed red, puffy, and he was sporting bags underneath them, like he had been crying all night. But something else had changed. He looked drained but relaxed, as if the entire weight of the world had been taken off his shoulders. The air around him seemed less uptight or high-strung. Did you have breakfast? Naruto asked. The shinobi didn't have to answer him, for his stomach gave its audible output. Naruto laughed, and Minato flushed in embarrassment. Take a seat, my treat. Naruto gestured to the free one next to him. Seeing that Minato was going to refuse, Naruto quickly cut in by saying, it's what comrades do, look out for each other. Tapping the Konoha forehead protector on his hip. Now what's your order? Minato paused for a moment and looked at the menu, then answered, I haven't eaten ramen before, so I don't know. Naruto blinked in disbelief. Being in a village which had a ramen stand for over 25 years and he hadn't stepped into the place once. Much less had a cup of instant ramen. Those were the cheapest, easiest, and fastest things to make. Was this teen his future father? Because every time he found something about him was not what he'd expected or heard. Jiraiya did say he'd inherited his mother's personality. Thank God for small favors. Minato tried not to fidget under the older blonde's stare. Was that the wrong answer? Had he offended him in some way? Why did he even care about what the shinobi felt about him? Why? His musing was cut short, and Naruto's stare was broken by a voice. Who ordered one of everything? The ramen chef and owner of the asked. If Minato remembered correctly, the chef's name was Tucci. Minato watched Naruto's face nearly split with grin. Over here, Aji-san. Waving his hand in the air, as he spoke. The ANBU captain's disbelief grew, as he watched the ramen chef shuffle back and forth with bowls of ramen. Are you really going to eat all of that? Minato asked as he watched Naruto break his chopsticks. Yes, he answered before pointing the chopsticks at the NBU. I want you to try out each dish and tell me what flavors you like. Minato looked at him incredulously. No one had ever done this for him before, and he had never seen this done among his comrades or teammates. Couples, yes, he had seen them sharing a meal and introducing each other to their favorite dishes, but apart from that, no. He looked at Naruto again, thinking this was a sick joke of some sort. No, he thought. From the week of observing the older blonde, he knew he was the type of person who was completely genuine about his actions and words. When Minato saw complete sincerity in other shinobi's eyes and face about his offer, hesitantly, he picked up a pair of disposable chopsticks. Breaking them, he slowly took a bite from the nearest bowl. Chicken. Alright, but not something he would claim as a favorite flavor. Fish. No. Beef. No. Shrimp. Okay, but no. And Minato went on and on. There were some points he had to stop testing the ramen flavors because they started tasting the same. When Naruto asked him why he stopped, he explained with a sheepish look, feeling disappointed with him for letting the jounin down after he went out of his way to help him. But older shinobi just smiled and ordered a roasted pork fillet. There, that should clear everything up, Naruto said as the chef placed the dish in front of him. Why is he being so nice? Minato wondered as he watched Naruto practically inhaling through the bowls he already tried. Is it because of that? I don't pity you, Naruto announced abruptly, putting down the now empty bowl. As if his blonde companion had read his mind, he continued, I'm nice to you because I like you, Minato-san. And shot Minato one of grins that would put the sun to shame. A moment later he went back to attacking the next bowl of ramen, and by doing so he completely missed the pink tinge that colored the fair cheeks of the young ANBU captain. Reassured by the amount of honesty that was behind the statement, he went back to his meal. Finishing the fillet, he resumed trying the ramen flavors. There were only a few more bowls left. When he tried the last bowl, which was miso, he nodded in approval. You like miso as well? Alright, Naruto said and turned to the cook and shouted, Aji-san, 2 more bowls of miso. Inhaling that dish as well, Naruto paid the bill. Just as he was going to leave, he heard Minato speak. Kazama-san. Call me Naruto, he interrupted. Naruto-san, Minato corrected. For some reason Naruto liked it when the teen said his name. Thank you? Naruto gazed at Minato. The teen had such a peaceful smile. He knew the ANBU was not thanking him only for the meal. There was too much gratitude in his voice for just giving him free food. He could almost hear what the younger blonde was trying to say. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for giving me my life back. Changing his ever-present grin to a soft smile, Naruto gently placed a hand on the teen's shoulder. The younger blonde still recoiled, but not as badly as the first time. But Naruto didn't take his hand off. This was his way of aiding the teen to overcome his minor setback. Looking into similar blue eyes directly, still smiling, he said, Anytime, Minato. He dropped the honorific to speak on a more familiar level and continued, It's what friends do. Taking his hand away, Naruto left the ramen stand, leaving behind a wide-eyed blonde teenager. Once again, completely missing an already pink-cheeked captain turned a darker shade. Soon after the initial reaction faded and Minato's face returned to a normal color, he let a secretive smile appear on his face and turned back to his meal. It seemed like he'd found another reason to like ramen. Completely satisfied, Naruto dashed to the Hokage Tower. He was already an hour late, so gone was his first impression. Not that he cared much about it, but it didn't hurt to try. Since he was lost in thought and sprinting on rooftops at a fast speed, he couldn't stop himself in time to avoid crashing into a large white figure that seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. After somewhat embarrassing and ungraceful landing in small pathway between 2 tall apartment complexes, Naruto realized the body he crashed was no other than the infamous Toad Sage. What the hell, Ero-sennin? Naruto yelled, nursing the bump on the back of his head. It was miracle he hadn't cracked his skull after that fall. I should be asking you that question, Gaki. The Sannin yelled back, also nursing some bruised areas. What were you trying to do, turn yourself into some lethal flying projectile? The sage grumbled. I'm late for a meeting. Now hurry up if you're here to tell me something, Naruto demanded impatiently. Fine, you impertinent brat, Jiraiya said, quickly casting a strong genjutsu around them and performing a chakra scan. He continued, I want to update you on the council meeting. That caught Naruto's interest. Seeing that the blonde was listening, Jiraiya went on. You passed, they accept you as a loyal shinobi of Konohagakure. Naruto let out a breath of relief but then asked. There's a but coming, isn't it? Jiraiya nodded and Naruto sighed. We didn't think this through enough. The sage answered. They wanted to know why they haven't heard of this Marigakure before. Naruto shot him and I told you so look. Ignoring it, Jiraiya explained. So Sensei and I told them it was a small village and had no alliance with any main hidden village. So you and your predecessors decided to actually take the meaning of hidden village on to another level. Meaning that your shinobi went as other village ninja when they were hired, and when you got mission request it was handled through mail, and the ninja went to meet the client outside. So apart from the inhabitants of the Mori, no one has ever been to the village or heard of the village. Pretty foolproof, huh? Naruto just blinked and then said blankly, that is the biggest load of bull I have ever heard. Face-faulting Jiraiya hit his student on the head. Be grateful for that crap, cause it got you out of even bigger load of it. I still won't admit any this, Ero Sennin. There was small pause before Naruto piped in, what if Danzo send his root minions to check the place? And they find no destroyed village and bodies? It's a forest village, you guys live in tree houses or caves. So I'll send some toads to burn some trees and clear some area, after all I need to practice my sage mode. The bodies, let's imagine, you incinerated the ninja and buried the civilians, giving you time to assume that whatever remaining infrastructure rotted away. Jiraiya answered, taping his chin with his index finger. You can make any amount of bull on an imaginary village, I'm not gonna admit it. Gaki, it's really nice to hear that you're so loyal to your village you won't even lie. But in your situation you can't really tell the truth. The sage replied dryly. Can I be vague? Not on paper. Pause, aren't you supposed to know this? Yeah, but a lie is still a lie no matter for what reason. That way of thinking is going to get you killed. I'd like to see that happen. The Sannin hit his student again. Gaki, you may have gone back in time, but you're not God. I know, you pervy bastard, the blonde replied, rubbing his head. Speaking of going back in time, how did you wind up here? The Sannin asked, looking at the now uncomfortable blonde. That's a very long story, for another day. Naruto dogged the question. When I come to terms with the events that force me to choose to go back in time, I'll tell you. It's a promise. Jiraiya nodded. He had never seen the blonde so depressed. It seemed so strange to see the ball of unlimited bright energy so deflated. His tone didn't have its regular bounce or joy, it was soft, forced and tired. The shinobi's eyes had also lost their spark and his face seemed so empty without that ever-present foxy grin. Glancing down, the Sannin's eyes widened. Naruto's hands were fisted so tight that blood was trickling from them. Naruto! Jiraiya called out, effectively distracting the shinobi from his self-destructive rage. Why? The blonde replied, quite confused why the Sannin called him by his name. Take your time, I'm in no rush. The sage answered with a comforting smile. When the blonde realized what he was hinting at, he gave him a grateful smile in return. After a brief pause, Jiraiya spoke again. But that was not the only thing the council picked on. Naruto sighed in response. They wanted to know about your background information. At this, Naruto's posture became more alert. Seeing this, the Toad Sage elaborated in detail. From the memories you gave me and Sensei, we gave them a vague picture. You are an orphan from Kuni, who I happened to meet at the age of 5, while doing my research. Naruto snorted at that. Taking interest in your personality, I decided to train you. By the time my long-term reconnaissance mission was complete, you were at a satisfactory level and we parted. At least there is some truth in that, Naruto commented dryly. Ungrateful brat. The white-haired sage retorted, but there was no venom behind it. Switching topics, Jiraiya leaned against the wall of one of the apartment complexes saying, I saw you and Minato at the ramen stand. Naruto understood what the white-haired man was trying to say. Gigi, told you? The Toad Sage nodded. Thank you for your impeccable timing, and I'm glad that you are helping him. No problem, Ero Sennin. Naruto waved it off. But the sage continued, I don't want to burden you, but my hands are tied. I cannot do anything until he tells me. Otherwise he'll just think I pity him and push me away. Sounds like what he would do. Naruto mused out, tapping his chin thoughtfully. He then said, I want to help, Ero Sennin, but it's up to him if he is willing to take it. Pausing for a moment, the blonde said, also I don't want to resort to the option of beating it into him. Sound counterproductive, Jiraiya commented. Don't worry, it works, Naruto said, thinking of Niji, Gaara and Nagato. He just needed to pick a fight with the blonde. It couldn't be spar, since it involved a lot of emotional issues, and the younger blonde needed to vent. Seeing the Sanin's disbelieving gaze, he answered, it's a last resort thing. If everything else fails, I use it. Jiraiya shook his head, saying, whatever, Gaki. Also, don't you have meeting you have to get to? Crap. Jiraiya could actually feel the air shift at the sudden departure of the blonde. Why doesn't he use a body flicker? Entering the Hokage's office via the window, he asked blindly. Gigi, out with it. What you planning? The Hokage, not a least bit surprised, answered while smoking his pipe. Gaki, so glad that you could join us. Ha sat casually sitting on the window ledge, so he wouldn't give away his confusion. Naruto asked us? Where is us? Looking around for a second person. He could feel another chakra, which was familiar. But he couldn't pinpoint the exact location. He could, but the direction the chakra signature was coming from behind the Hokage table, and he saw no one standing. So he thought he was sensing wrong. Soon as the words left his mouth, he saw it. A painfully familiar tuft of gravity-defying silver hair came into view from behind the tower of paperwork. He didn't. Naruto thought, quickly looking at the old Hokage in disbelief. Seeing a cheerful smile and the same annoying glint in his eye, Naruto let out an exasperated breath. He did. Kazama Naruto, this is your apprentice Hatake Kakashi. Hatake Kakashi. Little Hatake Kakashi. You're late. An irritated prepubescent voice came from the child. The irony, Naruto thought before letting out a howl of laughter. After nearly falling out of the window laughing, Naruto calmed down. Still amused, he looked at his future sensei. His much younger future teacher was dressed in a miniature A&B uniform. They make those in that size? Save for his top, which was a short-sleeved black t-shirt with a thick white strip on the shoulders. The child wore black elbow-length gloves with metal arm guards. Even at this age, he still wore his mask. Damn it. The only physical difference was that Naruto saw both his eyes, and his forehead protector wasn't slanted. But his personality was another story altogether. Hatake Kakashi wasn't a calm, collected, laid-back and relaxed shinobi in his younger days. Instead, he was militaristic, strict, obedient, alert, and uptight. The model shinobi. In Naruto's opinion, he was a brat. A brat with an attitude that he knew how to use. It kind of disturbed Naruto how such a cold personality could come from a child so young. But when the child tried to chew him out for not being on time, he couldn't help but laugh, which only further aggravated the boy's mood. He thought about all the payback he could get, and one was using his sensei's late excuses. No, the blonde stopped himself from using the most common excuse of the silver-haired boy's older counterpart. From what he heard from Gai-sensei, Kakashi was not the creator of those excuses. Instead, the inventor was his teammate Obito. If the Hatake child met the Uchiha and heard a similar excuse, coincidence would not be enough to cover it. So instead he opted for a vague truth. Sorry, had to pay my daily respects to gods, met and made a new friend at the place of worship, thus converting him into a fellow believer, and once leaving the shrine I ran into a white toad who wanted to inform me on the procession of last night's unholy gathering. Kakashi gave him a deadpan look. Naruto smiled brightly in return and Sarutobi sighed. Kazama Naruto, this is Hatake Kakashi. The Sandaime repeated, since the first time seemed to have fallen on deaf ears. Meet me on the roof within 15 minutes, Gaki, directed Naruto, earning a glare from Kakashi, but being the perfect shinobi he left immediately. Soon as Kakashi had left the office, Naruto flopped into the chair and began glaring at the Hokage, who in turn seemed to take no notice of the intense glare and happily continued to smoke his pipe. You're enjoying this, aren't you, Gigi? Naruto stated accusingly. From your reaction I thought you enjoyed it too, the old Hokage retorted innocently. Naruto glared. Sarutobi smiled. After a brief pause, Naruto sighed and Sandaime's smile grew wider. He won. Tell me the bio, Gigi, Naruto said, already regretting his decision to even consider training the little scarecrow. Hatake Kakashi, 6 years of age and newly appointed Chunin. Naruto cut him off. 6 and Chunin? What age did he graduate at? 5. 5? He's a prodigy, it's kind of expected of him. Now I don't even want to train him. Why ever not? He's a genius, and it's a known fact training a genius is no fun. I really don't understand your reasoning. It's logical enough for me. Sandaime let out a sigh while he eyed the time traveler, who was sitting cross-legged in the chair with his arms folded like some sulking child. He expected the blonde to jump at the chance to help his future sensei, but the blonde's refusal was quite a stumbling block. That when the idea hit him. Naruto, I heard from Jiraiya about your Nindo. Naruto's eyes widened. The old man wasn't going to use his belief against him, was he? Seeing that he caught Naruto's attention, he continued. Sarutobi kinda felt bad for the blonde. It was to never give up, wasn't it? Taking a dramatic pause, he went on, kind of hypocritical in what you're doing now. Seeing that there was no way out of this, he sighed, lowering his head in defeat. Fine. Naruto announced, but then added, I'll give the brat a test, and if he passes, only then will he be my apprentice. The sandaime nodded and Naruto got up to meet the brat. Maybe he should take his time to irritate the boy. Soon as he reached for the door, the sandaime cleared his voice to catch his attention. One more thing about the boy. The Hokage paused a bit. Hatake Kakashi is a new orphan. Naruto raised his eyebrow in question. His father, Hatake Tsukumo, took his life this morning. Kakashi was the one who found the body when he was coming home to announce his passing of the Chunin exam. Letting the information sink in, Naruto nodded and left the office. Soon as he closed the door, Naruto smashed his head into the opposite wall. Once realizing that the impulsive action didn't seem to help his impending headache, he turned around with his back against the corridor wall and sank to the floor. Staring in the direction that led to the steps of the Hokage residence rooftop, he let out a tired sigh. Kakashi-sensei didn't say much about his past. Naruto knew Kakashi was part of his father's future team. His teammate and best friend died saving him, which he never allowed himself to let go of the guilt. He didn't know much about Kakashi's family background, specifically about his father. But after becoming Hokage, he had to reread the history of Konoha, and that was when he found out about the fall of the White Fang. If only I remembered the dates, I could have prevented the man's death. Naruto shook his head vigorously. He had to focus on what was happening now, not on what had happened. At the moment, he had a mentally and emotionally traumatized boy on his hands. A boy who had just found his father's cold body and was hiding his tears behind a mask. Both literally and figuratively. Standing up, he walked slowly towards the staircase. Naruto knew before the sandaime used his words against him that he wouldn't refuse training his teacher. Even not knowing about the brat's trauma, he knew he wouldn't fail his teacher. But he wouldn't give the boy a walk in the park either. Naruto prided himself for not being the type of person who held grudges, but his behind had a bone to pick with the boy. Maybe after passing the little scarecrow he would ask Kakashi to move in with him, and if the brat refused he would ask the Hokage to do it for him. He did have a spare bedroom and he was a fairly responsible adult. Even though Kakashi was a legal adult by shinobi terms, he was still a child. No matter how mature the prodigy was, his mind was still inexperienced, fragile, and just isn't ready for what is to come. Plus, it would do wonders on the psyche of the boy to get away from the memories of his old place. When he reached the base of the staircase, it hit him. Gigi knew all along. Looking back in the direction he came from, he let out an annoyed huff. The old man knew all along that he wouldn't refuse and would go so far as to become the guardian of his apprentice. The spawn of the disgrace. The village pariah. Just like him. Still annoyed at the old man for manipulating him into it, and taking pleasure of his misery, he announced, looking up. I'm no therapist, Gigi. If the old man was watching from his crystal ball, he would get the message. There was no if, for indeed the Hokage was watching the blonde. If the crystal could work both ways, he would have heard the sandaime's amused yet weary tone say, I know, but you're the best I've got. Naruto took his time while walking up the staircase. He needed to think of a test for the brat. The ones he thought of so far were for teams and for teamwork. Since this was an apprenticeship, he was drawing a blank. How was he going to get through to the 6-year-old? Kakashi was currently extremely driven by the shinobi code due to his father's deflection of them, which indisputably led the Hatake name to disgrace. Driven by code would mean a punctual, emotionless, obedient and put mission first ninja. The type of ninja he never understood, the kind he hated. No, I'll leave the whole rules are stupid talk for later. Still wondering on what to give the child as a test, Naruto sighed. Pausing at the door for a moment, he opened it. You're late. An irritated reply was the first thing he heard. How did he put up with us? Naruto wondered. Then again, we weren't genius brats. I know, isn't it great? He retorted, smiling at the boy, who in turn narrowed his eyes. Still emotional, this won't take as long as I thought it would. Naruto walked across the roof towards the edge. Kakashi tailed the blonde obediently. Once the older shinobi reached the railing, he leaned against it casually so he could face the child ninja, who was in a stiff attention pose. Directing a welcoming smile at the child, Naruto began. My name is Kazama Naruto. I like ramen, training, the color orange, and making new friends. I dislike traitors, fresh vegetables, superficial idiotic people, and a certain lighting jutsu. He rubbed his chest unconsciously. My hobbies are pulling pranks and watering plants. My dreams is to Naruto trailed off, glancing upwards at the Hokage monument. He smiled softly. My dream is to make sure, whatever happened to my village will never happen to yours. Kakashi looked up curiously at the monument, and then at the blonde. Seeing this, Naruto said, gesturing. Your turn, Chibi. Kakashi glared at the older shinobi but answered in a childish professional tone, my name you already know. My likes and dislikes are not important. I don't have any hobbies or dreams. Naruto stared at the child for a moment, before commenting dryly, this is an introduction, Gaki. It pays to have a personality. Well, he's still the same with giving information about himself. If not worse. What for? It would only become a hindrance. A cold, confident textbook answer. Kami-sama, give me strength. Wait. Give me patience. If I had strength, I'd kill the brat. For many reasons. Example, getting laid, screwing around with little brats like you. He received a glare from the little scarecrow, messing around with your enemies so you don't have to waste energy, and many more fun activities which make life worth living. Naruto swore he could see a scowl form under the material of the boy's mask, mentally congratulating himself for getting the boy to use his facial muscles before they began to rot away. He continued to meet the glare of his future student coolly. Maybe it won't be bad as it seems, the blonde jounin thought. If the 6-year-old could give him such an angry glare without showing any emotion in his body language, tormenting him until he cracked would actually be fun. He grinned at that thought. Gold and Silver stared at each other for a little longer, until the older shinobi decided that competition wasn't going to end anytime soon and said, I'm going to give you a test. Naruto began, still maintaining his unwavering gaze. To see whether you are worthy of being my student. He answered Kakashi's silent question. Naruto turned around so he could see the view of the village. He continued, meet me in training ground 11 at 7 in the morning. Kakashi, taking the hint that the meeting was over, turned to leave. Soon as he was about to walk away, he heard the blonde pipe in again. Oh. Yeah, before I forget. Be prepared for anything, Kakashi-chan. The boy's skin crawled in anticipation and annoyance. He could almost feel the grin in that voice. Sending a soft yes in response, he left the Hokage residence to prepare. Naruto remained on the rooftop. Propping his elbows on the railing, Naruto continued to look down upon the village. This view gave him so many memories, both happy and sad. Allowing the breeze ruffle his hair, he closed his eyes. I promise you all, like my predecessors and my father before me, I will gladly place my life to protect this village and all its inhabitants. We survived the Pain's attack, we survived Madara's attack. So hell, we are going to survive his attack. Don't be afraid. We have the will of fire with us, in our hearts, in our body, in our soul. It was in our forefathers and it is in our children. The will of fire always succeeded the curse of hatred. Peace will always win against war. So do not fear. Do not doubt. I would like to make a humble request. No one challenges him. No one engages him in battle, save for me. You all have people to return to, so I ask you one more time. Leave Uchiha Sasuke to me. Sasuke. Naruto snapped, his eyes opened. The will of fire did win against the curse of hatred. But was it worth it? Looking up at the sky, half wishing God would take pity on him and give him an answer. Sighing, he lowered his head. Once he did, he felt it. A familiar presence. You can come out, Minato-san. There was a brief moment before a figure appeared next to him. For some time neither blonde said a word, until the captain broke the silence. How did you know I was there? Naruto didn't have to turn to know that Anbu was staring at him, for he could practically feel the other shinobi's eyes burn into his head. Brushing away the few strands of hair that flew across his face, he answered. Training. Feeling the anger spike from the teen, he added, due to bare necessity. Seeing that the younger blonde accepted his vague answer, Naruto continued to gaze at the village. Minato sneaked glances at the older man periodically from the corner of his eye. He seemed wearier than when the captain met him in the morning. What happened in the span of an hour that left the jounin so drained? Everything the new shinobi did and said made no sense. The man was just too unpredictable. Minato fought the blood rushing to his face when he realized that he had been caught staring by the very object he had been staring at. Cobalt blue eyes had locked his cerulean in an intense gaze. "Why are you here, Minato-san?" It took everything in the ANBU captain's willpower not to twitch. The Jounin had asked that question in the most innocent way. There was no annoyance directed towards him for spying on their meeting or hostility. Just plain curiosity. Even though the new shinobi had asked the question in such a way the captain didn't know the answer. Why was he here? Seeing that his clone was patiently waiting for his answer, Minato just said the first thing that came into his mind. "I was curious about Sakumo-senpai's child." Naruto blinked in response. Now that was interesting new information. "Really?" he asked, perking his head in curiosity. "How well are you acquainted with the brat's father?" Minato pressed his lips together, mainly due to suppression of his laughter. He had never heard anyone called the silver-haired prodigy or asked about Konoha's white fang in such a casual manner before. "Why do you want to know?" he asked back. Naruto sighed. "Well, if I'm going to be teaching that scarecrow brat, I must at least know something about him, and since he is going to be all tight-lipped about it, how am I going to get anything out of him?" Minato smiled as he watched the blonde run his hand through his spiky hair in frustration and answered. "That is no reason to ask around for information about your comrades. When they are ready or have enough of trusting you, they will tell you." "Ah, still the good little shinobi. Thank you, Mom," Naruto thought. It seemed like he had hit a dead end. Just when he was about to give up, he remembered the captain's curiosity about him. Using that as bait, he causally began. "Nothing in life comes for free, so how about a deal?" Minato didn't respond, but the stillness in his posture told Naruto he was listening. "Hook. You answer my question and I'll answer yours. You have my word." The captain didn't verbally respond, but his eyes narrowed and looked at the newly appointed Jounin. "Line." After a moment of contemplation, Minato finally said, "Deal. And sinker." "I asked first, so you start." Naruto cut in before Minato asked his question. Seeing the reasoning in the statement, he nodded and began. "Well, by the time I had reached Jounin rank, it was nearing the end of the Second Shinobi War. Since we had a deficit in the shinobi, Sakumo-senpai took some of us Jounin and trained us to ANBU level. Jiraiya-sensei wasn't there, for he was concentrating on running his spy network." He took a brief pause to allow the information to sink and continued when he saw a slight nod from Naruto. "Once I gained the ANBU rank, he asked me to stop calling him sensei, so I resorted to calling him senpai instead." Naruto's lips formed an amused smile. It seems he inherited nothing from the blonde in front of him save for his coloring. He didn't have the etiquette, calm, collected personality, or the quiet, controlled voice. He was loud, boisterous, frank, to the point type of guy. Even though he did have manners and respect, he gave it only to the people who deserved it. "I believe it's your end of the bargain." The prodigy captain's voice cut through. "Nothing SS rank, I don't want Gigi after my blood," Naruto quickly amended. The last thing he wanted was to be torn between breaking his word and causing a paradox. Minato nodded and for a moment appeared to be lost in thought. Naruto meanwhile fought the urge to fidget in anticipation. After what seemed like forever in Naruto's opinion, Minato cleared his throat and asked, looking directly into the eyes of his companion. "Who is Sasuke? Who is Sasuke?" Soon as those words left his lips, Minato saw a complete change in the blonde's features. His warm, friendly expression vanished and was replaced with a blank, emotionless front. His relaxed posture became tense within a second and his grip on the railings tightened. But what were still expressive were the Jounin's eyes. They widened with shock and surprise at first, and then narrowed in suspicion before finally settling for a hollow, haunted look. For a moment Minato swore they were violet for a few seconds. Even though they were standing on a roof at around noon, he felt cold. This was the same mood that took place when he first met the blonde and placed his foot in mouth when he figured out that the shinobi had lost his village. Suppressing a shiver, he continued to wait for the blonde's answer. "How do you know that name?" Suddenly a tight, controlled voice asked. Minato blinked. That took him aback. He couldn't even imagine that such a cheerful person could speak in such a manner. The captain hesitated to give a reply. He wanted to keep that information away from the blonde to tease him, but decided against it when he saw other shinobi's reaction to the question and his hand nearing the kunai holder on his leg. Glancing at the face which normally possessed a sunny grin, now gracing a dark, hostile look, he answered. "I heard you mutter it under your breath when you were dosing at the railing." Minato kept his eyes focused on his blonde counterpart. The Jounin didn't release any killing intent, so he didn't alert any of the ANBU who were residing within the roof of the Hokage residence. but the air of hostility was enough to get the message across that this was an extremely sensitive topic. There was a brief pause when neither shinobi said or did anything. Naruto was caught between the past life and the present one. Saying that name was completely different to hearing it being said by someone else. He didn't think that hearing his name could provoke such an effect from him. Who was he trying to kid? He was fresh from war, which included an extremely emotional reunion. It was a blessing in disguise that he chose to travel to this time period instead to the one with his comrades and friends. Naruto didn't know how he would be able to handle the guilt of seeing his friends alive, naive with countless possibilities in front of them. When he knew, he was the one that made their blood and bodies to be used as paint for the battlefield. There was nothing left. The bodies of both enemy and ally littered the field, slowly staining the ground blood red. There was no wind, the air was stagnant, so was everything else. What was once stood a proud and powerful village was now nothing but a large mass of rubble. Only one lone figure was upright. Uzumaki Naruto, or was it Namikaze? It didn't matter anymore. Death surrounded him and nothing was left. No one was left. He looked brokenly at what once was a battlefield. He had won. The will of fire had overcome the curse of hatred yet again. But this wasn't peace. No, this was silence. So many hopes, so many dreams, so many futures. All was gone, everything was gone, everyone was gone. Sakura. Kakashi. Yamato. Ino. Shikamaru. Chuji. Hinata. Shino. Kiba. Sai. The list went on and on. Was it worth it? He asked in his mind. He couldn't speak, he had no energy left. Maybe I should go too. The thought was attractive, but he had not the energy to lift the kunai in his hand to slit his throat. Then slowly he felt himself falling to the ground. The sky was dark gray, and he heard the sounds of distant thunder. Even Kami-sama is crying, he mused as he felt the first drop of water fall on his face. He listened to the patter of rain as it descended on the many fallen bodies of brave men and women, washing away the blood. Mentally kicking himself for overestimating himself, he pushed away those memories into the recesses of his mind. Now was not the time to hit the bottom of depression. Suppressing the habitual reaction caused by hearing his name, Naruto strained his body to unwind. Minato let out a breath he didn't know he was holding, when he saw the other shinobi's stance relax. He could tell that the shinobi was still struggling to control himself against his instincts. The captain knew that this topic was thin ice, but curiosity was too much to bear. He heard the official version of the shinobi's background information. Even though he knew that the Hokage and Jiraiya-sensei were leaving out a lot of details, there was some truth in it, and that was enough to pacify his curiosity. The blonde prodigy couldn't think of any other question after he heard the tone the Jounin used when he said that name. It was desperate, hopeless, and wistful. Who was this man, to bring such emotions from the blonde, and why did he feel a painful twinge in his chest? Deal's a deal. Minato's introspection was cut off when he heard Naruto's voice. The older blonde seemed so haunted and was giving him nostalgic smile. Even though the Jounin was standing in front of him and was looking at him in the eye, Minato felt the man was looking past him. Cursing his curiosity, he waited for the blonde to continue. Naruto turned back to the view of Konoha, lowering his head so that his hair was covering his face. He began. He was the Jounin trailed off. Swallowing audibly, he rubbed his chest reflexively again. He looked at his opponent, Sasuke. He seemed so peaceful, relaxed and unburdened. He was smiling. This was the first time Naruto had seen such an expression on the pale Uchiha's face. Throughout his entire life he always saw a smirk, or a smug smile, never such a carefree, gentle one. Team, you should smile like that more often. It almost made you worth the effort. Kami, this is hard to explain, Naruto said to himself, as he ran his hand through his hair in frustration. Sasuke is, well, Sasuke, how in the 5 nations do you explain that? An out of the ordinary, complicated, twisted, weird but wonderful relationship? Which included him trying to kill me on a multiple of occasions and me finally killing him. Thus resulting me to travel to the past, so none of this bullshit ever happens again. You don't have to, Minato began, but Naruto cut him off. Deal's a deal, I gave you my word and that's one thing I do not break. Minato snapped his mouth shut and nodded. He spoke those words in such a way that the captain couldn't help but listen. Commanding, yet not autocratically. This was the first time he had seen the blonde act his previous rank. After staring ahead for a few moments, Naruto began. He was a shinobi. A very good shinobi at that. Pausing a moment, the Jounin licked his lips and continued, he was my teammate, my greatest rival, my best friend and brother by everything but blood. But we were so similar yet different. Just like yin and yang, and he trailed off to silence. Minato nodded in acceptance and left his companion, mainly due to the fact the situation had become so tense that it was difficult to breathe. But there was another reason for his departure, even though he didn't want to admit it. The twinge he felt earlier now evolved into a full-blown wrench. Why did it hurt so much to hear about a shinobi he had never met? Why did he feel so envious of a man who was probably dead? Why? Allowing those thoughts to occupy his mind, Minato sprinted through Konoha. Kakashi returned to his home soon as he was dismissed. Immediately he began preparing himself for the test. Sharpening all his kunai, shuriken, checking all explosive tags and ninja wire, he allowed his mind to return to the meeting of his new master. Soon to be master, he corrected himself. He was confident that he could impress the blonde shinobi, but there was an inkling of uncertainty. Pushing those feelings away, he went back to evaluate the blonde. Flashback. The Sandaime placed down the morning newspaper when he hears a soft knock on the door. Glancing at the clock on the wall of his office, he let out a smile. 7 o'clock exact. There was only one person who could be that punctual. Come in, Kakashi. A small child opened the door and walked across the floor of the office so silently and emotionlessly. It pained the old Hokage to see a boy of that age act in such manner. Children were supposed to be energetic, boisterous, and naive. How he wished that he could place his foot down on the boy's advancement, but sadly, even being Hokage, there were limits. Hopefully, by putting this boy under Sunny Blonde's guidance could give the emotional comfort and growth the silver-haired child desperately needed. The report he'd received from his secretary this morning about the child's father only strengthened the old man's decision. I know today is a very emotional day for you, and I apologize for interrupting your grieving. Please don't worry, Hokage-sama. Shinobi do not feel any emotion, so you are not interrupting anything. The Sandaime refrained from pinching the bridge of his nose in exasperation. Please, Naruto, work your magic with this child. Moving on then, first I want to personally congratulate you for your passing and creating a record for the youngest shinobi to pass the Chunin exam. Thank you, Hokage-sama. The Sandaime nodded and continued, the main reason for your summoning is that I took great appreciation in your talent and applied you for apprenticeship. There was a flicker of surprise and happiness that flew across the boy's eyes, before they returned to their customary dead expression. The child bowed, saying, Thank you, Hokage-sama. The shinobi who will be training you is new to our ranks. He has permanently transferred from his village Murigakure, which is now destroyed. Kakashi nodded, soaking the information. Do not worry about his loyalty. He is a student of Jiraiya, which is the reason he wanted to come here to continue his career as a shinobi. Kakashi pondered from what he heard and he asked, Hokage-sama, what are the man's abilities? The Sandaime smiled at the boy gently before answering enigmatically, you have to see it firsthand to know. Not questioning his superiors, Kakashi nodded in acceptance, but the curiosity he held for his soon-to-be master only grew. Flashback. As time passed, Kakashi became agitated. A real shinobi should be on time for anything. Being late could be fatal in battle. When the blonde finally arrived, the Chunin couldn't help but be appalled at the lack of respect the blonde had for the Hokage. But when the Hokage returned the disrespectful greeting with an equally casual term, Kakashi was shocked. But the disrespect he had for the blonde was forefront, and he couldn't help himself but reprimand the blonde for his tardiness. Kakashi had expected many things from the blonde for that comment. But he was taken back when the blonde began to laugh. Most ninjas feared and respected him. Some would be annoyed by the fact they were being chewed out by someone so young, and he himself expected to get a lashing for speaking against his superior. Quite puzzled at the blonde's behavior, he waited for his reason for being late. After hearing the somewhat bizarre explanation, Kakashi officially tagged the shinobi down as an unpredictable nutcase. He glanced at the Hokage if this was some terrible mistake, but when the Sandaime repeated the introductions again, it took all his willpower not to sigh in defeat. When the Jounin addressed him as Gaki or Chibi, he was at first angry. During his career as a shinobi, he had been called that by his colleagues who didn't seem to get along with him, or by his enemies who mocked him for his age and father's disgrace. Even by some of his superiors who didn't believe in his aptitude. But since his rapid advancement through the ranks, the mockery was replaced by fear. Now both the shinobi and civilian population addressed him formally. All his life he was deprived of his childhood. His mother died at a young age and his father was either on a long-term mission or too depressed to remember he had a son. This was the main cause for Kakashi's drive to pass through the ranks, to obtain his father's attention for even a brief moment. His training regime left no room for play or interaction with children his own age. His father's failure led him to be alienated by the village inhabitants even further, and the Hitaki name became the scapegoat for them. The treatment he received wasn't inhuman, but it was still discriminating and humiliating, which resulted in Kakashi never becoming close to anyone. His genin team could barely stand him, and his Jounin sensei was extremely vindictive towards him. However, then he realized the shinobi's tone held no malice, mockery, or disrespect in his tone. During their brief meeting, he began to understand the blonde was treating him as a child. First, he was irritated at the fact that he had to show the man up to stop calling him that, but when he analyzed the interaction, he found out he enjoyed the treatment. Studying the blonde shinobi further, he discovered the Jounin was different. Though when the young adult looked him in the eye, he saw no pity but warmth and understanding. No one save for the Hokage looked at him with warmth, but there was a presence of sadness as well. Everything about the new shinobi was bright and warm. Appearance, personality, and behavior. Even though he just met the shinobi, he could tell the man was honest and genuine about his actions, no matter how unpredictable in nature he was. There was something about the shinobi that made Kakashi drawn towards him, despite his blatant disregards for the rules and respect for his superiors. Although the newly appointed Chunin had told off his superior, the man smiled and teased him, which made the prodigy feel embarrassed for his disrespect. But at the same time, it didn't feel like he was speaking with his superior. He had observed this interaction among civilians and shinobis. So this is what it feels like to have a brother? Kakashi froze for a moment at that thought. Where did that come from? Shaking his head rapidly, now was not the time for those type of feeling. He wrinkled his nose in disgust. He was a tool, and tools had no emotions, for they could hamper the mission. If he allowed those feelings to continue, they would interfere with the test the Jounin would provide and would lead him to failure. The Hokage saw him as a talented, useful tool to request a man that has been trained by the one of his students. From what he had heard from his superior's chatter, that the man was a Kage-level nin. It was a privilege to be trained by Kage, and if all of this was true, he could have something to hold his head high about. But first he had to make sure he could convince the shinobi that he was worthy of being his student. The chances of beating him were non-existent, and the strategy depended on the nature of the test, which the blonde shinobi hadn't revealed. So Kakashi assumed that it was something like the genin test, only without the teamwork element. Another thing that made Kakashi curious was what the blonde was specialized in. When apprenticeships were given out, they were generally focused in a particular field, like interrogation, cryptanalysis, assassination, taijutsu, reconnaissance, genjutsu, etc. The shinobi didn't seem to fit in any category. He was a mixture of everything to be specialized in any specific field. He was intimidating but too warm for interrogation, too noisy for assassination, but had fairly quick responses. The silver-haired shinobi mulled over, putting a mental note on those thoughts, so he could ask them if he became the blonde's apprentice. He went back to his preparation. Packing his equipment, he sprinted to Training Ground 11. The blonde had given him a day to prepare, so he made use of every opportunity he got. The boy scouted the area, burning the terrain into his memory, making note of every tree, stone, river, and bush. Every little thing counted if you were going to engage in battle with an enemy who was way above your level. After he was satisfied with surveying the area, he began to set up traps. Kakashi glanced up at the sky, and then back at his handiwork. It seemed that he was going to be spending the night in the training field. Just like Yin and Yang. Huh? The blonde Jounin let out an amused smile, quite fitting, don't you think, team? And he looked up at the summer blue sky that was slowly darkening. Who is Sasuke? From all the questions he had to ask that one, no wonder he went after mom. Naruto continued to gaze at the village. He wasn't angry at blonde teen for asking at that question. Only surprise and sadness. The hostility he felt was due to a conditioned reaction he had for hearing the bastard's name. In a way, he was glad the blonde had asked that question, for it forced the cold hard truth in his face that he wasn't okay as he thought he was. It was evening when he decided to finally remove himself from the Hokage residence. Jumping down onto the streets, he began to walk aimlessly through the village. Today was an extremely emotional day, and he wished he could drown the past with a good bottle of sake. Sadly, Fuzzy would flush out any sign or symptoms of intoxication before they even began. Useful when he was going undercover as a drunk, and enemy ninjas lowered their guard when they saw him down bottle after bottle. But when it came to using it as an antidepressant, he had no such luck. Though the sake didn't have any effect on him, he drank because it made him feel closer to his surrogate mother and godfather. The familiar burning sensation of alcohol, when it slid down his throat, always washed away homesickness and made him remember the good times. After he had spent a good deal on the bar, he could pick up a beautiful woman for the night. A warm body next to him would be pleasant change. The Naruto depression removal process consisted of 3 simple steps. 1. Go to a bar. 2. Drink some sake. 3. Get laid. But first, there is something else that has to be done. He thought and walked towards the Konoha cemetery. He had a grave to visit that belonged to a certain Hatake Tsukumo. Naruto stirred awake only to find a hangover taking over his senses. Yesterday he had visited Hatake Tsukumo's grave. He had not been surprised to see the absence of any sort of offering at the new stone. Hatake-san, I don't know if you can hear me, but if you do, please listen. Crouching down, my name is Naruto and I am taking your son under my wing. Even though Naruto knew the man was dead and he had a high chance that he was speaking to a slab of stone, he still felt compelled to inform the parent. I've seen your son's future and I promise you, I will do everything in my power to make it happier than it was. A light evening breeze blew gently through the gravestones. I promise you, I will be there to protect and guide him. Pausing to gather his thoughts, Tsukumo-san, the choice you made. I just wanted to say that, I would have chose the same thing if it were me. The waft of air gently circled him, ruffling his sunny blonde hair. Your son in the future will realize that you did choose the correct option, for he himself said those who break the rules are trash, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than trash. That was his belief, which I carry on. Just as he was about to leave, a strong gush of wind blew past him and Naruto swore he could hear someone whisper a soft, relieved thank you. After paying his respects, he went straight to Anraku Sakai. It was a bar that catered mainly for shinobi and was run by a retired shinobi as well. The bartenders and waitresses were ninja who were forced to withdraw from their career or they just resigned from active duty for various other reasons. It was already late evening and the usual early crowd had already settled in. As soon as he got himself comfortable on an empty bar stool, he immediately ordered a jug of sake. During his drinking, Naruto paused to notice that he was becoming a little tipsy, but it took a longer time when compared to a full-blown seasoned alcoholic. Fuzzy must still be tired, he assumed, and downed the cup. It was time-consuming, but for the first time the whiskered blonde finally managed to become drunk. From his hazy memory he remembered chatting up a beautiful kunoichi, who landed herself in the bar stool next to him, and they walked out of the bar together. But after that he couldn't remember to a great extent, but from the state of undress and the warmth of the bed, he definitely got some last night. That was when he felt another presence. He felt a soft, petite feminine frame wrap around him. A pair of hands sneaked across his chest, mapping out his torso, leaner legs entangled his, and as a result, a well-endowed womanly figure pressed against his back. He turned his head slowly and a mass of deep violet hair came into view. Odd. He wasn't picky with women, but he leaned more towards lighter hair colors. Moving slowly so he didn't wake the slumbering woman, he untangled himself from his bedmate and walked across the room to have a shower. Once he finished his shower, he felt refreshed and happier. The Naruto depression removal process had yet to fail him. Grinning, he walked out of the shower with a towel wrapped around his hips. He remembered he had a brat to test. Pushing his wet hair away from his eyes, he walked into his room. Glancing at the bed, he noted it was unoccupied. Looking around, he noticed there wasn't anyone in the room. Wondering where the mysterious female had gone, he entered the living room. That was when he saw her walking out of his other bedroom in a towel wrapped tightly around her chest. His drunken mind was not dulled in the area in picking ladies. Not overly endowed but agreeably proportionate. Long-toned legs that connected to a well-developed behind which swayed from side to side as she walked. You're quite comfortable for someone who woke up in a stranger's house, he stated as he watched her strut to his room, removing the towel around her body to dry her waist-length hair, leaving her stark naked in the process. A man who could drink a river, retain his gentleman qualities, and have mind-blowing sex afterwards is no stranger in my books, she replied playfully, and she looked up at him with tan-colored pupilless eyes that shone mischief. For some reason she seemed so familiar. Naruto leaned against the door frame and continued to watch her get dressed. She didn't seem to mind, so like hell he didn't either. Plus she was doing it extremely slowly. Might as well relax and enjoy the show. When the purple-haired kunoichi was ready, Naruto walked her to the door and opened it for her. Just as she was going to leave, he took her hand and brought it up to his lips. May I have my good friend's name? He asked. She flicked her hair and replied teasingly, I don't normally give my name on one-night stands, but since you are the gentleman, I'll make an exception. Leaning her entire body against his, she pecked his lips and whispered her name against them. Naruto froze as he watched her leave. Mitarashi Hanami. He just had sex with Anko's mom. I really hope insanity isn't a STD. It was 7 o'clock in the morning when Minato was going to leave his apartment. He had some time to spare, so he opted to use the stairs and walk to the Hokage residence. Soon as he cracked open the door, he was greeted by the sight of spiky blonde hair behind a waterfall of purple. Quickly closing the door and masking his chakra, even though it was useless against his blonde neighbor, it could buy him some time since he was preoccupied. After the epic failure of a conversation yesterday, Minato was severely uncomfortable in facing the Jounin. The young captain hadn't slept at all last night, for his thoughts kept traveling back to what the new Jounin said the day before. Even if Minato looked past what the blonde said about this Sasuke, the expression and the tone of voice used was what really drilled the words in. The shinobi seemed to age beneath his eyes. The normal energetic persona vanished and was replaced with a weary, old, and troubled front. Minato had seen this expression before. He had seen this look grace the face Sandame's countless of times, especially during the aftermath of the Second Shinobi War. Fully aware that he could use his balcony as an alternate exit, Minato continued to watch the shinobi and kunoichi interact through the crack he created between the door and frame. His fist and jaw unconsciously tightened when he saw the kunoichi lean forward, literally pasting herself against the blonde. How impertinent of her to throw herself at the new shinobi! Isn't she aware she is ruining the reputation of all the Konoha kunoichi? Does she have any shame at all? Minato blinked at that thought. No, he corrected himself. He wasn't angry about the kunoichi's flirtatious behavior. It was their nature and part of their job description. He was angry because she had chosen that certain blonde to entice, and from what he could see the blonde liked it and was captivated by her. He had heard of Mitarashi Hanami. She was queen of seduction and used her sex appeal to its maximum to get whatever she wanted. Even though she had a 3-year-old daughter, men still found her desirable. He heard countless stories from his comrades about how she played with men's hearts until she got bored and left. When he saw the violet-haired woman leave another love-struck shinobi at his door, Minato took matters into his own hands. Naruto had saved his life more than once, and he had intruded his privacy yesterday. It was his turn to return the favor, although it was saving the blonde from an unnecessary heartbreak from a selfish woman and not from death's door. Yanking open the door, Minato did not expect to be greeted by the image of the blonde half-nude. The shinobi has dressed only in a white bath towel which was wrapped loosely around his hips, exposing his bare and chiseled torso. He must have had a bath, for his hair was dripping water down his equally wet, well-built body. It was the first time the captain had seen the blonde this exposed, and he could feel the blood rush up to his face. Thankfully his neighbor was still in a daze to notice the flustered blonde, giving him the time he needed to regain his composure. In the processes of doing so, Minato noticed that there wasn't a single injury on the blonde's body. This was quite strange for shinobi practically accumulated scars throughout their careers. But then his eyes settled on the only disfigurement on the tan skin. It was a large grotesque web-like circular burn that was situated a few inches towards the right away from his heart but directly over his lung. From the branching of the old injury, Minato concluded it was most likely from a lighting jutsu. Then it hit him. The blonde rubbed the exact same spot when he spoke about his dislikes and Sasuke. Doing the math, Minato's whole body tensed in anger. He was my teammate, my greatest rival, my best friend and brother. How could anyone treat him like that? Especially one he considers a brother. Minato thought furiously. The shinobi had so many qualities that even the best ninja lacked. He never judged anyone by face value. He got along with everyone, no matter if they were shinobi or civilian, young or old, weak or strong. Even though it was against his energetic nature, the shinobi was a patient and forgiving man. Even though twice Minato's curiosity had nearly ruined his relationship with the blonde, the shinobi excused him and gave him another chance. Why would anyone try to kill him? Mina-chan, you really have to stop living in your head. Suddenly he became aware of a pair of blue eyes which was colored a richer shade than his own, looking down into his. Naruto's face was merely a few centimeters away from his own. His blonde hair weighed down by moisture, and the ends dripped water onto the captain's uniform. Minato could practically smell the man's scent. He didn't use any scented soap, for that was impractical for shinobi unless they were going undercover. Yet the teen could grasp the scent that uniquely belonged to his neighbor. It reminded him of the gentle breeze that flitted through forests of Konoha. The fox Anbu turned red at that thought. Too close was all Minato could think when he gauged the situation, and reflexively propelled away from the jounin, thus resulting him to smash his head into the wall behind him. The teen heard a cry of surprise before everything faded to black. When blonde-haired teen regained consciousness, the first thing he became aware of was the pounding that throbbed through his head. Blinking away pain, he took in his surroundings. The structure of the room was like his, but everything was reverse, and there was an abundance of the things in the color orange. He was in Kazama Naruto's apartment. slowly lifting himself up from his lying down position on the black couch. He looked around the living room and kitchen. The place was neater than he imagined it to be. The main theme was obviously orange and was furnished quite attractively in a style of that of a comfortable bachelor. The furniture was black, and there were a few paintings hung strategically on the walls of the living room. Minato didn't recognize the style, so he took a closer look. He saw the name Sai elegantly written at the bottom right-hand corner. The majority of them were on mystical beasts, but the largest of them all was a drawing of people. Most of the people in the painting had an uncanny resemblance to the clans in Konoha, but since the entire painting was done in black and white, he couldn't really assume anything. One male was sleeping with his head on the lap of a female whose hair was in a long ponytail, with her back against another larger male's who in turn was eating some snack food. Next to them was a shinobi enthusiastically waving his hands at male with long straight hair who was not so enthusiastic, and a kunoichi who wore her hair in two buns hiding her laughter, which was caused by antics of both men. To the left of that group was another three. One was shinobi who was lying on top of a large dog with his finger pointing accusingly at another shinobi who hid half his face with a high-collared trench coat and teardrop sunglass. There was a kunoichi with long hair between both men, frantically trying to calm down the ninja with an iken. But in the center of the group of 12 was kunoichi with shoulder-length hair sitting down smiling softly at him, and another was shinobi sitting cross-legged with a paintbrush and drawing pad on his lap. In between the two shinobi was another male. Everyone else was seated save for him, and he had a carefree grin on his face. It was Naruto who standing as the centerpiece of the painting. Who are these people? Minato wondered as he continued to stare at the painting. Everyone seemed so relaxed and comfortable. Even Naruto was far happier than he was now. That was us before the war took its toll. A voice emerged behind him. Minato spun around and saw Naruto standing behind him. He was dressed in black shinobi pants and sandals with a black long-sleeved turtleneck which had diagonal neon orange and blue stripes on it. In his hands he held 2 white mugs of coffee. Handing one to Minato, he said, "I like mine light with 2 sugars." Minato nodded, it was his preference as well. Then Naruto pointed to the female sitting on his right. "That's Sakura, she was on my genin team. Beautiful yet deadly." Moving his finger to the shinobi who was painting. "And that's Sai. When I asked him to draw this picture, he didn't want to include himself. It took a lot of persuasion for the prick to finally give in." "Why?" the captain asked. Naruto paused for a moment to take a sip from his mug and answered, "Cause this picture represents all the original genin teams, and Sai was a replacement." Sai was his replacement. Minato caught the unvocal insinuation. Putting his mug down, Minato turned to face the jounin and bowed. Not raising his head, he rambled. "I know I have done this before, but I am truly sorry about yesterday's events. I had no right to ask such a question, which brought on so many bad memories. I understand if you are disgusted with my presence." Minato couldn't finish his rant for an unexpected blow hit him exactly where his bump was. Stunned by the sudden action, the teen fell onto the floor rubbing the back of his head. He continued to stare up at the older blonde who was now calmly drinking his coffee. "If it's anyone's fault, it's mine," Naruto stated slowly, holding his hand up to silence the ANBU before he could cut in. "I made the deal and you had no idea who he was. You were just curious, and the last time I checked, there is no crime in curiosity." The jounin crouched down so he would be on eye level with the teen. "So stop being a drama queen, moron. You did nothing wrong." Naruto finger flicked the dazed teen forehead to bring him back to reality. Handing the ANBU's mug of coffee again, he commented, "Now drink that before it gets cold. Coffee tastes like crap if it's not hot." Standing up, he walked to the kitchen to wash his empty mug. Just as he turned to leave, he saw a relieved smile grace the teen's face. He's gotten so used to bottling things up that when it comes to anything emotional, he doesn't know how to handle it. Naruto mulled over while washing the cup. When he saw the teen approach the kitchen sink, Naruto took the mug from the captain's hand. "I'll wash that." Seeing the younger man's questioning stare, he answered, "It's 8:30. The prodigy nodded in thanks and left through the balcony. Naruto let out a low whistle in admiration as he watched the teen zip around the rooftop. I was not exaggerating when he said that his father was fast. If this was his current speed when he was a teen, he couldn't imagine what he would be like when he matured and created Hiraishin. Naruto felt himself tremble with excitement. He couldn't wait to fight the blonde at the pinnacle of his power. He only had to wait. Then his stomach rumbled, signaling it was time for breakfast. Looking at the clock, he sighed. He still had a test to give. So many things to do in so little time. Kakashi was beyond irritated. He officially hated the blonde. All those thoughts he had for the blonde and the respect flew out of his mind when the first hour passed. "You're late," Kakashi gritted out when he felt a familiar figure approach where he was standing. The object of his irritation laughed and smiled idiotically at him before patting him on the head. "Sorry, Chibi, but had to be a gentleman to a beautiful woman who chose to share my bed. Then a little blonde fox rammed its head into my neighbor's apartment wall, so I had to keep an eye out for the kidling until it regained its senses. And when it did, I found out it was in an emotional dilemma, so I had to conduct a quick therapy session." Kakashi blinked at the excuse. The man honestly believed in what happened, for it appeared in his body language. "I'm being taught by someone who should be in a padded room." "Right." Naruto clapped his hands. "The objective of your test is to steal one of my swords. But you can only use taijutsu during this spar." Kakashi nodded. Test seemed simple enough, and he may be able to succeed in it even with the limiter since he had a smaller stature. "Ready?" the blonde asked, and Kakashi went into his personalized academy stance and nodded. "Go." Soon as the word left the blonde's mouth, Kakashi charged forward at full speed. He then launched a series of punches and kicks that the jounin dodged. But even though Kakashi couldn't succeed in landing a hit on the shinobi, he managed to drive the jounin into a trap he had set. "Brilliant tactic, but sadly for you, I was proclaimed the king of pranks." And the blonde evaded the tripped wire. Seething, Kakashi threw a kunai at the wire. Cutting it brought on a huge wave of shuriken at the blonde. There were so many shuriken unleashed in the wave that the only way out was to use substitution, thus breaking the rules of the test. Kakashi watched slightly horrified when he realized that the blonde wasn't going to substitute himself. Soon as the first shuriken touched the jounin's skin, he vanished in a plume of smoke. Shadow clone. He used the ninjutsu before the test, so it didn't count. Kakashi immediately focused on a chakra scan. After a few minutes, he managed to locate a signature similar to the blonde on the other side of the training ground. Dashing in that direction, Kakashi soon found himself being greeted with the sight of jounin sitting comfortably on a rock reading a book. From the cover, Kakashi could tell it was an adult novel, and he averted his gaze. "Second stage is, you have to use ninjutsu and genjutsu to destroy this book," the jounin stated calmly, not taking his eyes from the novel. Sensing the boy's chakra flare, he called out, "Begin." Ninja art body flicker. Kakashi appeared right in front of the jounin and made a grab for the book. But Naruto merely evaded and jumped off the rock onto the ground. Wasting no time, Kakashi made the hand seals for the next jutsu. Demonic illusion, hell viewing technique. Even though the low rank of that genjutsu, it still managed to shake Naruto up. This illusionary technique draws its strength from the fear that dwells inside people's hearts, and shows them the one thing they wouldn't want to see. Naruto steeled his mind against sight of his fallen comrades, but what really startled him was the sight of Minato grievously wounded, looking at him brokenly. Squeezing his eyes shut, Naruto dispelled the genjutsu just in time to dodge Kakashi's next attack. Ninja art, shadow shuriken technique. Instead of the usual two Fuma shuriken compiled on top of each other, Kakashi used a third shuriken, but it was a normal shuriken. The first two were thrown to distract the opponent, and since it's D-rank, jounin would obviously see through the first two. But the last one, the boy attached the elastic version of ninja wire, giving him the ability to manipulate shuriken in mid-flight. Ninja art, manipulated shuriken technique. The disorientation from the genjutsu and the combination of two techniques allowed the silver boy to direct his shuriken to the book. Allowing it to sink into the cover, the young Hatake tugged the string, pulling the book out of the jounin's loose grip. Grabbing the book, Kakashi ripped it into two. The prodigy looked up at the jounin for results of his performance. Naruto smiled at the boy and began to clap. "Well done," Naruto said, "now come and find me." Then he placed his hands into a ram's seal and dispelled, leaving Kakashi alone thinking. Another clone? Kakashi was stumped. For the first time, he did not know what to do. After the jounin's clone had dispelled, he immediately began concentrated to search for the blonde's chakra signature. He was quite good at this from what he gathered from the training, missions, and Chunin exam. But no matter how deep he went, he found nothing. Training ground 11 wasn't a large ground like 7 or 3. It was the average, and if not smaller, so he didn't have a lot of area to search or cover. While scanning the area, he realized that this was also a part of the test. Kakashi was actually impressed by the blonde for his ability to create shadow clones, and it was the first time he had seen the ninjutsu being used. It was categorized as kinjutsu since it called upon a lot of chakra to create the clone and mental strength to handle the sudden inflow of information once dispelled. Once he performed another couple of scans of the area, he let out a sigh of defeat. He had to admit he couldn't find the unpredictable nut job and failed the test. Sitting down on the rock which the Jounin's clone had sat upon, Kakashi closed his eyes. He focused on his other senses to make up for the lost one. The Chunin could hear the leaves rustle for the slight breeze that flew through the trees of the training ground. He could feel warmth the stone radiated. He could smell the scent of. Wait. Kakashi paused, opening his eyes. He remembered catching the slight scent of ramen when they first met. Also, to create shadow clones, one would need a high chakra capacity. A high chakra capacity meant comparatively low chakra control. If he remembered correctly, the blonde chakra signature felt tightly controlled and suppressed, but the Jounin couldn't erase it like the ANBU. Assuming that he was correct, the blonde wasn't here at all either had he entered the training ground. Kakashi struggled to control his anger. He'd spent the entire night and day preparing for this test, and that pitiful excuse for a Jounin didn't have the decency to show up and test him in person. Sprinting towards the gate, he left the training grounds in search for the blonde. It was afternoon when Kakashi landed in front of Ichiraku Ramen, and his stomach grumbled. He had ration bars for last night, and today morning as his meals. Doing a quick chakra scan like he did on other food outlets, he found what he was looking for. Slowly walking towards the drapes, with each step trying to release the anger he was feeling, he entered the ramen stand. He saw the root of his irritation, comfortably sitting on a stool reading a magazine while eating a large serving of ramen. Kakashi continued to glare at the man who seemed not to notice anything. When the blonde turned the page of magazine, he said, "Have a seat, Chibi. You must be dead beat." Kakashi didn't want to admit it, but he was exhausted. His chakra was low due to pulling off multiple ninjutsu and genjutsu. His body ached after the taijutsu spar and running around Konoha in search for the blonde. Despite his anger, he complied. Climbing onto the stool, he waited for the blonde to explain. His hand fingered the handle of the kunai, in case the blonde had another bizarre reason. Once he got comfortable on the stool, he heard the Jounin call out, "Oyaji, you can bring in that dish here." The gaki finally turned up. Kakashi's grip tightened on the kunai. This man was no different than the rest. He was just like his Genin Jounin sensei. But his grip loosened when he saw a portion of salt-broiled sori and miso soup with eggplant. Kakashi looked up at the Jounin in confusion. "Eat up, Chibi. Then we'll talk." The prodigy didn't make any movement to eat his food despite the feeling of hunger gnawing his stomach. But he continued to stare at the blonde determinedly. "This is just another trick. You're being nice to me to win me over just so you can manipulate me. Too bad for you, I read all those books on mind control." Kakashi thought and let a smug smile grace his masked face. Naruto, immediately catching on to boy's refusal to eat, calmly closed the magazine. Placing the disposable chopsticks down, he turned to face the silver-haired Chunin. Looking directly into the boy's eyes, he said, "Kakashi." The Chunin posture became alert. This was the first time he had heard the blonde use his name. "I want to give you the results of your performance on the test, and I cannot do that with you about to drop dead." Naruto watched as the boy broke his eye contact to glance at the food for a second and then resumed glaring at him. Suppressing a sigh, the whiskered blonde sipped the soup and took a bite of the sori. "I really have to talk to Gigi about this paranoia problem." But the silver-haired child still glared at him. "Fine," Naruto said, throwing his hands in the air, "I won't peek." And he resumed eating his ramen and reading the magazine. Only this time with his back facing the young Chunin. "Brat." Some time passed when he heard the soft tap of the miso soup bowl being set down on the table. Slowly turning, he evaluated the silver-haired boy. The fatigue had reduced and the brat was sitting straighter than before. He could still see the mistrust in the child's eyes, but now there was a flicker of doubt as well. Taking the boy's unwavering gaze and uncomfortable silence as an indication, he began. "As you pretty much figured out, the test was in 3 parts. 1 was to check your taijutsu, speed and strength. 2 was to check your genjutsu, ninjutsu and hand seals, and 3 was to check your stamina and intelligence." Kakashi nodded in agreement and understanding. Once the anger faded away, he realized that the blonde was testing his ability to apply the data he'd received. Was that why the Jounin chose to sit at a ramen stall? Did his test truly begin that early? The blonde didn't seem the type to think that far ahead, but it was in the code that a shinobi must look underneath the underneath. The new shinobi just seemed to become more and more enigmatic to Kakashi, as he waited for the shinobi to continue. "The taijutsu style you use is a modified version of the academy style, isn't it?" The Chunin nodded. The standard style was not suited for him, for it required a lot of physical strength that his 6-year-old body did not possess and would not until he grew older. Tapping his chin thoughtfully, "Brilliant, cause it uses speed to compensate for the strength you have. Since you have a smaller body is actually above level, but that will change with time. Moving on to part 2. I was surprised you could use body flicker, but taking your chakra capacity into consideration, I assumed that you can use it only for short distances. Naruto looked at Kakashi, who nodded his head in reply. I wasn't surprised to see that you had quite the collection of ninjutsu, but the combo of the genjutsu and altered shuriken ninjutsu was impressive. So were your hand seals. Naruto paused for a moment to sip some water and recollect the information his clones had sent him. Part 3 was really the all-over, but focused mainly after completion of Part 2. Your intelligence was obviously quite high for the quick improvisation of the trap, the modification of the academy style, and the alteration of the shuriken jutsu. Pausing for a moment, the only area you really lack in is your stamina. But that too will come with age. Kakashi knew his stamina was a disadvantage, which was his reason for focusing on speed and aim. He didn't have the endurance to drag out fights, so he went on the one-and-done sort of attack to be effective in battle. His self-evaluation was cut short when he heard the Jounin's voice again. So if I put your abilities into stats, they would go like this. And Naruto handed a paper serviette to the boy. On the disposable tissue in bad handwriting read: Ninjutsu 2.5, Taijutsu 2, Genjutsu 1.5, Intelligence 3, Strength 1.5, Speed 3, Stamina 1, Hand Seals 2. Total 16.5. Even though he had a comparatively high total, the distributions of his skills were not that impressive. He did have high levels in intelligence and speed, but Kakashi knew he could not rely on those two alone. His stamina and chakra capacity were too low for him to be apprenticing for a Jounin who was the complete opposite. The chances for him qualifying for the apprenticeship were dropping. Kakashi's grip on the tissue tightened and his eyes began to prick with tears. He wasn't testing me on the success of the test, he was testing me on whether I was good enough to be his student. How foolish of me. He even told me. Noticing the black cloud descending upon the silver-haired boy, Naruto flicked the Chunin's nose. Chibi, he said, gaining the boy's attention. He could see the internal struggle the child was facing, trying to force away the feeling of failure. If he assumed correctly, this might have been the first time the boy was told he didn't succeed in something. Taking the paper tissue away, he said, in the end this means nothing. And he shredded the serviette. Scrunching the remains and throwing them into a bin, he continued, it all boils down to one question. Looking down, Kakashi bobbed his head in agreement. Do I or do I not accept you as my apprentice? Although it was immature of him and plain evil, Naruto made a dramatic pause before answering slowly and calmly, Hatake Kakashi, I. He never got a chance to finish when a group of ninja, Chunins from the style of their vests, entered the ramen stand. Hey guys, look who we have the pleasure of meeting today. The prodigious Hatake, known as the son of the great white fan, one Chunin announced condescendingly, which was followed by the sounds of jeers and laughter. The depression that Kakashi was feeling suddenly turned into anger. Gripping his kunai tightly, his eyes narrowed and in the process he leaked a bit of killing intent. But instead of intimidating the group, it only increased their laughter. Will you look at that? Chibi, here is trying to intimidate us. Another Chunin said, and the group laughed. Kakashi's jaw tightened so rigidly that if he added any more pressure it would shatter his teeth. But soon after the words left the Chunin's mouth, the laughter ceased immediately. Everyone in the ramen stand tensed up and froze. It was killing intent. But it wasn't from Kakashi or anyone from the group. Turning his head ever so slightly and following the frightened gaze of his tormentors, he found the origins of the tense feeling. It was Naruto. He was sitting casually on the stool, with one hand supporting his head. The blonde seemed bored and was absent-mindedly spinning a kunai on his index finger. All this time the blonde's fringe covered his eyes, but that didn't stop them from seeing the bone-chilling smile. The whisker-like scars only increased the animalistic look of the Jounin, along with the teeth of the shinobi, which seemed longer and sharper. Then he raised his head, meeting the gaze of his victims. As blue eyes glinted purple in the light, another wave of ki flew over the crowd. Even though Kakashi knew he wasn't being targeted, he could feel his flight or fight senses being activated. He knew he couldn't take on the blonde, but his body was too scared to even move. The air was thick and difficult to breathe. Kakashi could feel his heart hammering in his ribcage, and his pulse pound all over his body. Adrenaline was kicking in and his mind was screaming at him to move, but his body wouldn't listen. He was scared. Hatake Kakashi was terrified. The blonde Jounin slowly raised himself from the stool and walked towards the group. His steps were slow and silent, like a predator approaching his prey. The group of Chunin could barely contain their fear as the blonde approached them. That chibi over there is my student, brats. And he glared at the clique to make his point, making them tremble as a result. Only I have the authority to call him that. You address him like as you do to any other shinobi. Am I making myself clear? He asked forcefully. The Chunins nodded feverishly in response. It was not like they had a choice. Do or die. Now do yourselves a favor and spread the word, Naruto said, spinning around on his heels, and finished off with one last wave of Ki. Now beat it. He commanded harshly, canceling his killing intent, but the hostility remained. Soon as the tense atmosphere was released, the Chunins scrambled out of the stand, nearly tripping over each other in the process. Kakashi continued to stare at the blonde jounin. He had never experienced anything like before. That killing intent couldn't possibly be human. It was too animalistic and malicious for it to be of any human origins. Just who was this shinobi? The jounin seemed so harmless and friendly to be whatever he had witnessed a couple of moments ago. The transformation from a playful tabby cat to an angry tiger was so frightening that his entire body became cold. Even thinking about it resulted in goose flesh. He had been in few battles and he had received animosity daily from the shinobi and civilian community daily ever since his birth, but what he had just witnessed was something else altogether. Still terrified, he watched as the blonde apologized to the ramen stand owner, who merely waved it off, saying he didn't want to serve customers who didn't know how to respect others. Nodding in agreement, the jounin ordered another bowl of ramen. While waiting for the shinobi's order, Kakashi still remained rooted in the same position. He couldn't cancel the effects of the Ki himself, and if he could, he was too afraid to approach the blonde. Then he felt a wave of warmth wrap around him like a blanket. Kakashi felt as if someone had removed him from a cold underground cell and placed him in the sunlight for the first time. He felt safe and relaxed. When his body began to loosen up, he became conscious of why he began to feel this way. He had overheard when his teammates were talking to each other about their aftermath of their first battle on a C-rank mission. During their delivery of a scroll containing important information, they had encountered a jounin who was trying to obtain the scroll by intimidating them. Their jounin sensei killed the interceptor and apparently removed the after effect of the exposure to Ki. Kakashi, who managed to react to the act and help his sensei, didn't seem to recall undergoing any of the described experiences his teammates described. So this is what it feels like, he mused as he secretly enjoyed being bathed in the jounin's chakra. Didn't anyone tell you it's rude to stare? A familiar amused voice cut into his thoughts. Kakashi shook his head. Nobody had told him, but he had read about it in various books on etiquette. So what is the mental roadblock? The whiskered shinobi asked, keeping his playful smile on his face. Why? Kakashi asked after a few moments. Why did you accept me? Naruto blinked in confusion for a second, before answering with his own question, why not? The Chunin looked at the blonde's smiling face in disbelief. We are too different. Our strength lies on either side of the ability spectrum. You have limitless amount of chakra, stamina and strength, while I excel in speed, tactics and aim. We have nothing in common. Even our personalities are poles apart. He finished panting. The emotions he promised to keep locked up and hidden at the bottom of his heart were slowly, little by little, leaking out. Why does he care? Why did he buy him a meal? Why did he scare away the harassers? Why did he later on bother to waste chakra on him? No one had done any of that for him before. Not even his own father. Sensing an emotional breakdown, Naruto placed some money on the counter before flickering with the child out of the ramen stand. The two appeared seconds later on top of the Sandame's head of the Hokage monument. Kakashi didn't seem to be aware of his surroundings, for his eyes were transfixed on Naruto. The jounin knelt down on one leg so he could on the same level as the boy, and unblinking glassy eyes followed his descent. Naruto didn't expect the prodigy to react in this way. The reply, "Where's the fun in that?" no longer seemed appropriate anymore. Looking the boy in the eye, he spoke. Kakashi, he began, we are more alike than you think we are. Pausing for a moment, Naruto said, I know what it's like to be alone. And he allowed his eyes to convey the rest of his message. I know what it's like to be despised, to be mocked, to be ignored, to be helpless. I know what it's like to be hated for something you didn't do. Trying to blink away the tears, Kakashi's forced out a half-chalked "Why?" Naruto allowed a warm smile grace his face, and simply replied, because you are my student. Just as those words were said, Kakashi allowed himself to unravel. Trembling from the force of pent-up emotion, Kakashi frantically clung to the last fragment of his mask. But the blonde shinobi did away with that by simply wrapping his arms gently around the smaller frame of the boy. Gone was the cold, emotionless, calculative and professional shinobi. Under the facade of a young prodigy was a 6-year-old child, who was in desperate need for some emotional comfort. This was something I wish somebody gave to me. Naruto thought absently. Strange, isn't it, Kakashi-sensei? Instinctively wrapping his smaller arms around the Jounin's neck, he buried his face in the crook of the blonde's shoulder. The young Chunin allowed himself to do something he wouldn't have before in his short life. Kakashi allowed himself to cry. It was late evening when Kakashi began to settle down. The entire time Naruto cradled his future sensei, and looked ahead at the dimming horizon. He didn't expect the young shinobi to break so soon. He didn't expect the boy's situation to be that complex. Even though Naruto's treatment was harsher, he was able to express himself, and since nobody was aware of his heritage, he didn't have to be haunted by his father's shadow. He'd had the Sandaime and the Ichiraka people by his side. Although they didn't completely fill the void of loneliness, it was still far better than nothing. Kakashi, on the other hand, had no one. He had his father's failure haunting him every moment of his life. Since he was a prodigy, there were the constant demands and unrealistic expectations from councils and his peers. To add to the silver-haired boy's list of problems, he had chosen to follow the shinobi code to the letter, thus killing the only option to release any type of built-up pressure. The combination of these situations had put a great deal of stress on child's psyche. Naruto was actually amazed that the 6-year-old's mind hadn't already broken under the strain. Once certain that the boy had cried himself to sleep, Naruto flicked from the Hokage monument to the one of the nearby resident rooftop below. It was then that he realized that he hadn't the slightest idea where the Chunin lived. Kakashi-sensei, in his time period, lived in an apartment a few blocks from Training Ground 3, but he wasn't sure whether he'd lived there since childhood or moved in when he became Jounin. He didn't want to wake the peacefully sleeping child, and it would call up too many unwanted questions if he went to the Hokage now, with the shinobi in his arms. So he went with the third and remaining alternative. Naruto sprinted towards his apartment. Entering through the balcony, he created a clone and told it to make the spare bedroom inhabitable. Once the room was ready, the Jounin placed the boy on the futon and took off his ninja gear. Leaving his mask, shirt, and pants, Naruto tucked the child in. Closing the door, he walked towards the kitchen. Even though he wanted to go to Anakusaki, he knew leaving a prepubescent child alone and bringing home a woman to sleep with was unethical and irresponsible, especially if he wanted to petition for guardianship. Rubbing his temples, Naruto pulled out a jug of sake from the bottom of the countertop. Since he couldn't go out to drink, he figured he might as well drink at home. Pouring himself a cup, Naruto made himself comfortable on one of his countertop stools. After having a few sips of the alcoholic beverage, he spoke out. If this behavior continues, I will have to label you as my personal stalker. Turning around so he was face to face with his uninvited guest, he continued. Isn't that right, Mina-chan? Minato blushed beneath his ANBU mask at the words the Jounin said. True, he hadn't spent a day away from the blonde since his arrival. Even though it was unintentional, he somehow wound up in the shinobi's company. Shifting his weight from one foot to the other, Minato tried to think of an explanation to give the seated male. Before he could come up with a plausible reason, the whiskered Jounin spoke up again, grinning brightly. I'm just teasing you. Motioning with his hand to the seat next to him, Naruto offered, come and keep me company. It's kinda sad to drink alone. Nodding slightly in response, Minato shed the ANBU cloak and mask. Placing them neatly on the black couch, he approached the countertop. Settling on the stool next to one the blonde occupied, the teen watched nervously as the Jounin bent down to retrieve another ichoko. Minato fidgeted slightly as the whiskered shinobi poured the rice wine into the small vessel. He hadn't consumed anything alcoholic before and didn't know the level of his tolerance. The captain didn't want to offend the 20-year-old by turning down the invitation, so he accepted it instead. Picking the ceramic cup and bringing it to his lips, the teen took a small hesitant sip. It took all of his willpower not to openly gag at the taste. Placing his cup down, the young A&B waited for the burning sensation which flooded his sense to leave. Once the initial resided, the teen found the sweet aftertaste quite pleasant. So why are you here? A voice cut into his experience with the wine. Looking into the dark liquid in the vessel, Minato answered, some ninja reported, sensing some killing intent being emitted from a ramen stand. So the Hokage sent me to investigate. Pausing for a bit, he looked up and saw Naruto nodding at him to continue. Taking a deep breath, I arrived at the moment you informed the group about Sakumo-senpai's child being your student. Then after you flickered out of the stand, I headed to your apartment and waited. And quickly added after he saw the Jounin's eyebrows raise a little, I needed an explanation for the report which I have to submit to the Hokage. Naruto nodded in understanding and emptied his cup. Refilling it, he heard the teen further comment, glancing at the spare bedroom door, I didn't expect you to bring company. I didn't expect it either, he replied, running his hand through the mass of messy blonde hair. There was a brief moment of silence where either of them spoke. Taking a sip from the ichoko, the teen broke it by asking, why did you do it? Naruto blinked in surprise, then averted his eyes to the window. Because he is my student. The reaction was too strong for that to be the only reason. The fox Anbu pressed. Deliberately not meeting the gaze of the teen, the jounin simply replied, I know. Minato pressed his lips into a thin line. He was reluctant to force it out of the blonde. He didn't want to ruin the relationship they had. He already had 2 close calls and fear he recently acquired for the shinobi when he arrived at the stand. That killing intent wasn't like anything he had experienced before. Steeling himself for the unexpected, the Anbu gripped his kunai under the countertop and opened his mouth to interrogate. Before he could say anything, his companion spoke up, that boy's situation is painfully similar to mine. Then he downed the cup of sake in one shot and continued, he just chose to handle it, in my opinion, the harder way. So I had to step in before the chibi went into self-destruction. Refilling his Ichoko, Naruto added, plus I detest punks like them, picking on people they know who can't fight back. And spat out the last bit in distaste. Fucking pisses me off. Minato nodded and downed the remaining sake. He had a lot of explaining and paperwork waiting for him tomorrow. Letting the burning liquid slide slowly down his throat, the teen felt his troubles slowly melt away. Noticing his cup was empty, Naruto topped it up again while attempting to create conversation. Since you are the first shinobi I came across, my neighbor and my friend, why not tell me about yourself? And then added cheekily, since you obviously know about me. Minato's face burned in embarrassment at the last bit. He didn't mean to eavesdrop, he just had happened to overhear. Drinking slowly, he replied, my name is Namikaze Minato. I like training, inventing new techniques, and quite recently ramen. He flushed pink at the grin he received from his fellow blonde. I dislike traitors, people who threaten Konoha and its Hokage. My hobbies, I suppose, consist of reading and my dreams. Sorry, I haven't figured that out yet. He finished looking apologetically. Don't worry, it'll come with time. Naruto waved his hand. You said you like reading, what type of books do you like? He asked, taking a drink. My favorite novels are written by Jiraiya-sensei. Soon as his drinking buddy said that, the whiskered blonde spat out his beverage, and in the process surprising the blonde next to him. Staring at the teen-eyed disbelief, who was in turn staring back in confusion, Naruto finally asked the dreaded question. You like Erosenen's trash? He prayed silently. It was bad enough having every sensei who ever taught him being a pervert. The last thing he wanted was to be the son of one. Minato, realizing the reaction behind the jounin, shook his head frantically. No, no, no. I haven't read any of his. He searched for a suitable term, his adult fiction. He ended dryly, taking a sip of the alcohol. You don't have to be polite about it, you can call it porn. Naruto replied, relieved, then commented, you are the lucky one. The teen cocked his head in question. I had to be the pervert's editor to learn the techniques. He explained. It was one thing to read the crap. Another to figure out his crappy handwriting, to read the crap he wrote in the first place. The captain laughed at the mental image that statement gave him. When his laughter died down, he noticed the older shinobi was staring intently at him. Shifting nervously in his seat, he asked, what's wrong? Nothing, just surprised, that's all. Minato blinked in confusion. That was the first time I had seen you laugh. Naruto explained. The teen averted his gaze to the countertop in embarrassment. Don't get me wrong, but you should laugh like that more often. And he took a sip of sake before commenting absent-mindedly, it has a very pleasant sound. The fox Anbu turned a strong shade of deep red. The teen bent his head down so the jounin wouldn't see his face, and downed the beverage. Completely oblivious of the flustered teen, Naruto tried to start another conversation. One would think the fourth Hokage would be at least a conversationalist. Before he could initiate the conversation, 17-year-old asked, are you seeing Mitarashi Hanami? What a strange question to ask. Depends on what you mean by seeing. Courting. Naruto chalked on his sake. That is one term I thought they didn't use anymore. Don't tell me he's old-fashioned. Coughing and clearing his throat. No way, he replied, crossing his arms to form an X. I'm a love them and leave them type of guy. Plus I'm new here, why would I want to date anyone now? Also, what made you ask that question? The whiskered blonde looked at him strangely. Nothing really. Just saw you two at the door, and you seemed captivated by her. Minato let out a smile in relief. He felt comforted by the jounin's words. I wasn't captivated by her, Naruto protested childishly. His manly pride took a deep blow at that statement. Normally he was the one who captivated people. Not the other way around. I was admiring her. Minato chuckled, no doubt you were. I greatly dislike you now, you know that. I'll be sure not to lose any sleep over it. Why did you hide this charming side of your personality, Minato-kun? I reserved it only for you, Naruto-chan. I feel honored. Don't worry, you are idiot. You really have to stop complimenting me. Both blondes stared at each other, trying desperately to suppress the mirth that was shining in their eyes, but failed miserably. Naruto was the first to go, and was shortly followed by Minato. After the laughter died down, the two continued to drink their alcoholic beverage in a relaxed, comfortable silence. Ah, we finished this one. Naruto broke the silence when he went to pour himself another cup. I'll get another. And he slipped out of his seat to fetch the second flask of sake. Soon as he bent down to grab the second bottle, he heard a dull thud. Raising his head, he noticed Minato had disappeared. Looking over the countertop, he found the missing blonde, passed out stone cold on his living room floor. At least he's better than Lee. Then again, anyone is better than Lee. Bending down, Naruto went to lift the teen. Sliding one arm under the captain's knees and the other under the teen's shoulders, Naruto raised Minato from his floor. For the first time, he realized how much lighter and smaller the younger blonde was. He didn't notice it the first time he carried the blonde, for he was busy on focusing on covering as much ground as possible, and the anger he held for the missing neens was preoccupying his mind at the time. While carrying the unconscious teen towards the sofa, he didn't expect the ANBU to wrap his hands around his neck and nuzzle his shoulder joint. Awkward, Naruto thought as he froze. Not that Minato wasn't desirable. The teen was attractive, no doubt in that. He had the sharp features and the lean-toned body to go with it. Pale blonde hair and Columbia blue eyes went well with his fair skin. The calm, collected and highly perceptive personality combined with his appearance was ultimate cool guy. The whiskered blonde was surprised that the teen didn't have any fangirls or boys stalking his every move. That was when Naruto felt a pair of lips against the skin of his neck. Really awkward. He was confident about his sexual orientation. The reason why he chose being bisexual was simple. If he chose to be hetero or homo, he would be denying half the world his love and miss out on a lot of possibilities. Plus, being around Sai taught him to appreciate beauty no matter where it was or in what form it was in. But Naruto as well had limits. He had to draw the line concerning the people in the past. True, his objectives in this trip were to change the future, and his mere existence changed a lot of things. But he could not and would not meddle with people's hearts and who they were destined for, because the slightest change would wipe out the entire existence of somebody. Other than that, the thought of being romantically or sexually involved with your father made him squeamish, even by his standards. Just then the source of his discomfort decided to nip on the area of skin he previously kissed. No matter how wrong this was in Naruto's mind, the feeling of sharp teeth graze his skin ever so lightly, and then to be replaced with soft wet lips was too arousing. Okay. That's it, and he let go, dropping the teen onto his sofa. The ANBU, with his eyes still closed, squirmed a little, before finding a comfortable position. Once satisfied that the blonde was sound asleep, Naruto retrieved a pillow from his bedroom and tucked it under the captain's head. Removing the armor and shoes, he used the cloak to cover the slumbering teen. Pulling the second flask of sake, he poured himself a cup. First sake, then long cold shower. Walking to his balcony with the alcohol, the whiskered jounin looked up at the night sky. Smiling to himself, he closed his eyes shut. Opening them, he found himself in a sewer. Haven't checked on Fuzzy for some time, he thought, and walked towards the large cage. He easily spotted the large ball of fur trapped under the pillars. From the rhythmic rise and fall of the demon's chest, he assumed that the fox was asleep. Chuckling, he turned to leave, when something from the corner of his eye moved. Doing a double take, he froze. There was another sleeping fox trapped under his pillars. "There's two of you?" he screeched. "Shut it, you bag of useless human meat," one fox grumbled out lazily, cracking one of his eyes open. "Unlike you, some of us are trying to sleep." "Why are there two of you?" Naruto demanded. "There is no such thing as two Kyubi no Kitsune, stupid brat." The demon let out a yawn, displaying all its razor-sharp teeth to Naruto. "I may be stupid, but I ain't blind. I can clearly see another fox in this cage," Naruto yelled, looking at the sleeping fox. "Che!" The fox responded lazily, waving its 9 tails around. "Figure it out yourself, brat, I'm not your brain." "Kyubi," Naruto called dangerously, and then flicked his hand downwards, causing pillars around the demon's neck to slowly choke the fox. "I'm not in a mood for your games." "You impertinent brat!" the fox snarled, but pressure on his throat increased. After some time, the demon finally yielded. "Fine." Naruto eased the pressure but still kept his hand ready, in case the demon needed more convincing. "When your father sealed me, you were nothing but a newborn. You were too young to handle all my chakra. So he only sealed the yang half in you and the yin in the Shinigami's stomach along with himself. So you're the yang half, pointing to the sleeping fox. And that is yin. Glad to know that brain of yours hasn't completely rotten away. Ignoring the insult, Naruto thought for a moment, since we are in the past, shouldn't your yin half be in my mother? Kyubi glanced at his other half and replied, I don't know, brat, I suppose since you are the future vessel and have more seniority than her at being a vessel. Naruto nodded. It seemed a plausible explanation. Then the Sandame's voice flooded in. Hospital, the Kyubi disappeared and she is very weak and has to adjust with it not being in her. The dead demon consuming seal was like a gate periodically opening and interrupting the host chakra flow to release the Biju's chakra, so that the demon's chakra and the vessel chakra would fuse, giving the host large reserves and constant flow of chakra. Naruto's eyes widened in realization. If his mother didn't have an entity in her body supplying her chakra while she had the seal, that would mean the end of her ninja career. The seal would constantly interrupt her chakra system, but since there was no chakra flowing through, it would cause gaps and fluctuations in her chakra flow. Turning to the demon, he said, we need to get the Inu into mom, now. But the fox's reply was only to yawn and go back to sleep. Naruto opened his eyes to reality. Useless furball. He muttered quickly, putting the cups into the sink. He flickered to the hospital entrance. Dashing through the doors, he ran towards the desk that said patient information. I need to know which room Uzumaki Kushina is in, he asked hurriedly. The young woman behind the desk eyed him calmly and responded after looking through some papers, she's in room number 49. May I know who's asking? Kazama Naruto. He replied. He pointed to his forehead protector before running towards the stairs. He heard the woman call out behind him, visiting hours are over in half an hour. Yelling a thank you, he went in search of the red head. When he reached room number 49, he paused for a moment. Next to the door was file. Opening the file, it read, Patient, Uzumaki Kushina. Age 16. Sex female. Current health, coma. On the Glasgow scale, level 2. Naruto's eyes widened again. From the many hours of spending with Bachan and Sakura-chan, he knew a level 2 coma on any scale wasn't good. It wasn't good at all. Placing the file back, he entered the room. The smell of disinfectant was the first thing to hit him. Wrinkling his nose in disgust, he walked towards bed. She was very much younger than the time he met her, when he was trying to rid himself of his dark half behind the Falls of Truth. Her long red hair was shorter than he remembered, and she was paler as well. The teen was so still that one might have thought she was dead, save for the recurring beeping of the monitor and her breathing. It was chilling to see such a vibrant person so lifeless. Locking the door, he pulled the covers off her. Lifting her hospital gown up to her belly, he channeled chakra to her seal. When it appeared on her skin, he placed one hand over it and the other on her forehead. Then closed his eyes shut. He found himself on a barren land with a giant orb of stone hovering above the ground a few feet ahead of him. On the stone were 9 stakes hammered into it, and his mother's chakra chains hanging loosely like vines. Directly under the floating rock was his mother asleep. Behind him was his sewer and caged Kyubis. Now comes the hard part. And he closed his eyes in concentration. The pillars around the Yin Kyubi began to shift, forming a square cage around the fox, thus waking the fox in the process. The demon started to howl and struggle against the bars. Shut up! Naruto roared, effectively shutting the fox up. If you continue to struggle, I'll make the cage so small you won't be able to shift a single strand of fur. And the 6 sides of the cage came in closer to make his point. The tailed beast snarled viciously in response, but nevertheless stopped thrashing and curled up, eyeing him reproachfully. What's happening? A sleepy female voice joined in. Looking at Whisker Jounin, she asked, Who are you and what are you doing here? I'm a friend, who is just returning something of yours. Naruto answered vaguely and continued, But I need your help. Kushina looked confusedly at him, but when she saw the Kyubi, she cried out, Kyu-chan. The caged demon snarled at her. The redhead looked at him in explanation. I found him and he needed to go home. She giggled and asked, So what do you want me to do? The Jounin smiled warmly at her. I'm gonna bring Fuzzy to your floating rock, and I want you to seal him. Okay? Her brow furrowed. How do you do that? Naruto nearly slapped his head. Do you remember how he was sealed before he ran away? She nodded. Now imagine that happening to him. After a small pause, Kushina nodded again. Satisfied, Naruto turned to the caged Kyubi and motioned with his hand for the cage to rise. The pillar cage along with the fox hovered slowly to the stone. When it reached the rock, he signaled to Kushina. Biting her lip, she closed her eyes. The 9 stakes uprooted and pinned each of Kyuubi's tails to the hovering mass of stone. Then her chakra chains began wrapping around the cage. Then Naruto cancelled the pillars, slowly breaking them, and Kushina began tightening her chains. After some time, the Kyuubi was fully bound to Kushina's orb of stone. "Looks like the job's done," Naruto stated, and then patting the reed head, "Rest, and I'll be seeing more of you in the future." "Wait," Kushina began, but he withdrew from her mind and opened his eyes. Unlocking the door, he pulled down her hospital gown and replaced her covering sheets. Soon as he finished, returned everything to the way it was, the door opened and a nurse came in, with a clipboard and some equipment for the patient's regular checkup. "Excuse me, sir, but visiting hours were over a long time ago," she said, eyeing him. "I'm sorry, it looks like I fell asleep," and gave her an apologetically smile. The nurse almost smiled back before scowling at him, and replied in a clipped voice, "Make sure it never happens again." He nodded and leapt out of the redhead's window. Landing on the roof of a nearby building, he let out a silly grin, humming happily as he jumped from roof to roof towards his apartment. "Up. Wake up!" Naruto knew this voice. Where had he heard it before? "Wake up!" And then he felt a hostile presence next to him. Gripping the kunai he had under his pillow, the whiskered blonde snapped his eyes open. Blue eyes met black. "Kakashi." With his mask slightly askew, his gravity-defying hair in tumbled mess, and his clothes no longer clean and pressed, the boy still managed to look irate. "Oh, it's you." The Jounin's off-handed comment earned a glare from the child who was seated next to his futon. "Go back to bed, Chibi. Sleep is good for you," Naruto said, turning to the other side and burrowing back into the warmth his mattress offered. But doing so, he met another pair of eyes on the other side. This time they were blue. "Where do you keep the aspirin, Naruto-san?" the owner asked in an amused tone, despite nursing the mother of all headaches. "Do you two have something against people who enjoy the simple things in life?" "It's 10 o'clock, Kakashi stated dryly. "So that's a perfect time for one to spend sleeping on a holiday." "It's Tuesday, Naruto-san," Minato replied, rubbing his head. "I'm tired. I had to spend half my night in an unpleasant room saving a beautiful female from certain death, by performing an untested, purely improvised ritual that I might have not survived. Sadly, due to maintenance of my mysterious appearance, I had to leave without telling her my name." How does one reply to a statement like that? Minato and Kakashi thought, looking at each other in hope of an answer. While the two shinobi on either side of his bed stared at him in disbelief, Naruto shot up, surprising them both. "Now, look what you two done. I'm awake, sleep-deprived, and cannot return to the comfort of my mattress." Making a shooing motion with his hands, he continued, "Out, I need to change." Turning towards Minato, he winked. "Unless you want to show?" The captain turned a bright tomato red and lost the ability to access his brain. As Naruto laughed at the teen's discomfort, Kakashi merely shook his head at the antics between the two blondes and guided the momentarily flustered ANBU out of the Jounin's room. "We are at the gates of war, and this is what our best soldiers are up to. I really am worried about the fate of our village." Soon as the two shinobi left his room, the whiskered blonde let out a sigh. He didn't know how to interact with his new shinobi pupil. Apparently the boy had chosen to remain the same cold and aloof shinobi like nothing had happened, but there was a difference in him as well. When Naruto met the boy's eyes, he saw relief and happiness flicker through them. Also, the young Chunin's hand was trembling when he touched the Jounin to wake him up. As if the boy thought him dead. Running a hand through his bed hair in frustration, the whiskered blonde began to strip. "Never did I have my work cut out for me," he thought as he entered the bathroom. Looking into his bathroom mirror, his eyes fell onto his neck. To be precise, the area where his teenaged father had earlier chosen to leave a love bite. Although there was no mark, he had to thank Kyuubi for that. No amount of healing would erase the memories that incident left behind. No matter how hard Naruto tried to tell himself that the teen was under the influence of alcohol, nothing could comfort him from what he felt at that moment. Shock and awkwardness he could understand, but arousal. His mind was screaming it was wrong, while his body was responding the complete opposite. If he hadn't let the ANBU go and decided to visit his teen mother, only Kami would know what he would have done. Naruto wasn't disgusted at the whole incident, just disturbed. Touching the area with his fingers lightly, he glared at his reflection. He was thinking too deep into the matter. The teen was drunk and was obviously sexually frustrated, which led his intoxicated self to act on impulse. Occam's razor. Naruto mused as he stood under the shower. The simplest explanation is most likely the correct one. Meanwhile, in the living room sat two shinobi on the couch. One was taking in his surroundings, and the other was holding his head. Why does my head feel like someone set off an explosion tag and at the same time used my stomach as a trampoline? The blonde groaned out in pain. Spying the empty bottle of sake in the counter, his silver-haired companion asked Namikaze Taishu, "Is this your first time drinking?" The ANBU didn't answer but bristled in embarrassment, but that was enough of a response for the young chunin. "Namikaze Taishu, you are having a hangover." And Kakashi's mental image of the famous ANBU prodigy who was personally tutored by the great Toad Sannin himself was beginning to shatter bit by bit. After a somewhat uncomfortable silence, Kakashi continued in a drier tone, "Drink some water or coffee, and then eat something." Minato shot the chunin an irritated look. Being told what to do hurt twice as bad when it was coming from a 6-year-old child. "Just get me some aspirin and I'll be fine." Before the silver-haired boy could answer, another voice cut in. "Sadly, the Gaki is right. It's better to eat and drink something rather than shove some pills down your throat." Wearing an orange-red long-sleeved turtleneck and black shinobi pants, Naruto sat down onto the chair facing the two-seated shinobi. Musing up his hair, he caught the stares of both ninjas. "What?" he asked. The two prodigies looked at each other, until Minato spoke up. "Don't you have anything in a neutral color?" "Do not diss the orange." Naruto glared. "Me without orange is like Tsunade without her breasts." "Naruto-san, I wasn't insulting the color, just looking out for your safety." Glancing at Kakashi, "Also you shouldn't speak of such things in front of minors." The jounin just waved it off and replied, "It not like the chibi doesn't know, and it's good for him if he starts young." Oblivious to the open-mouthed captain and the red-faced boy. Plus he's gonna be a future porn addict. There are some things I can prevent, and that is not one of them. Seeing that no one was going to speak up, the whiskered shinobi clapped his hands and spoke, "Since we all are here and starving, I vote to go to Ichiraku for breakfast." "Ramen cannot be considered breakfast," a skeptical prepubescent tone voiced out. Lightly hitting his head, the now annoyed jounin retorted, "Shut up, Gaki. Ramen is the food of the gods, so it can be eaten at any time of the day." Kushin appeared out of her hospital room window. The entire hospital team that was in charge of viewing her medical progress was completely shocked when the kunoichi woke up from her comatose state early this morning. The doctor in charge explained to Redhead that due to the sudden disappearance of her tenant, her body had gone into severe chakra exhaustion, which inevitably led to a completely shut down. A Yamanaka had been brought earlier to examine Kushina, found out that she was mirroring the deep coma state she was in reality, in her mind. Later on when she woke up, the mind reader had been brought again, but only to reply shakily that the Kyuubi had returned to her body. Strangely, when the Hokage, who had been present during the entire mind transfer, had asked who had visited her lately, the receptionist at the patient information had replied Kazama Naruto, and a nurse had nodded her head saying something along the lines of falling asleep at her bedside. The information of her status of a Jinchuriki was hidden, only a few were aware of it, including the Hokage, the Sanins, a team of medics, and the council. So why a random person would come and visit her, let alone fall asleep at her bedside, and why did the Hokage let out a frustrated sigh? But that wasn't what put the kunoichi on the edge. Yawning, she placed her hand on her stomach, the exact point where the seal was. What was that? Kushina couldn't remember what happened clearly. Although she did feel someone had entered her mindscape, her instincts were not awakened until she felt Kyuubi's malevolent chakra flood her system, reactivating her brain to her senses, causing her to wake up only in her mind. Even though the teen was aware of what was happening, she still felt weak, exhausted, and groggy. Once she had woken up, she heard snarling, crashing, and a deep male voice speak commandingly. Hearing the unfamiliar voice of a human, she forced her sense to attention. Taking in the scene of a blonde jounin holding a glaring competition with the fox, she tried to appear intimidating and defensive. Although the redhead attempted to interrogate the man's uninvited appearance, it came out more of questioning, for there was something about the mysterious jounin. Home. That was how Kushina would have described him. His chakra, smile, personality, and mere presences reminded her of her home. Konoha was her home now, and she loved it dearly, but nothing would or could ever replace her birthplace. Everything about that shinobi was whirlpool. She could feel his chakra spin energetically and pulse with power, just like her clan's men. Just like home. It didn't frighten her, it calmed her down and made her feel relaxed. "I'm a friend." Yes, he was not the enemy, he was a friend. The red-haired kunoichi took pride in following her heart and gut. It had never failed her before, so why now? Everything, save for her head, told her that this jounin meant no harm, so why not take a leap of faith again? "I found him and he needed to go home. But I need your help." What would he gain in returning Kyuubi into her? While she had everything to lose if she refused his offer. Kushina accepted it, with a smile. Kazama Naruto, huh? The kunoichi thought. That was the name given by the receptionist on who visited her last night, and the nurse who confirmed it saying she found a blonde-haired, blue-eyed jounin who had 6 whisker markings on his cheeks, in her room. I'll be seeing more of you in the future. Yes, you will, Naruto-san. The red-haired teen smiled looking at the village. She had a lot of questions to ask. So I guess you guys are now acquainted? The jounin asked, glancing at the shinobi on either side while they were waiting for their order. Both prodigies looked at each other for a moment. Flashback. Kakashi cracked his eyes open. Strangely, he felt worn out, but not physically. Taking in his surroundings, he realized the reason behind his drained state. There was only one person in the Konoha who would have carrot-colored bed sheets and pillowcases. He was in Kazama Naruto's apartment. No. It's Kazama Shisho, now. He corrected himself, smiling beneath his mask as recalled the events of yesterday. When the young Chunin figured out how he wound up in his new teacher's spare bedroom, he turned a bright tomato red. How immature. He thought as he gripped the sheets tightly in his small hands. He'd cried in front of the jounin. He broke in front of a new shinobi. He snapped in front of the ninja who had just accepted him to be his student. How unprofessional. But his self-berating thoughts were short-lived when he remembered the embrace the blonde held him in. He was right in his earlier observation. The shinobi was warm. In that embrace he felt as if someone had wrapped him in a thick fuzzy blanket on a rainy day. He felt for the very first time, accepted and understood. Someone saw his pain and chose to soothe it. All the expectations, responsibilities and duties melted away. The cold glares, vindictive words, humiliating and discriminating actions didn't matter anymore. None of it mattered anymore, and chains that were tying him down all fell. After letting out all the frustrations, anger, sadness until he had no more tears out, Kakashi chose to listen to the heartbeat of the shinobi. He was too tired to do anything else save for closing his eyes and listen to the rhythmic pounding of the blonde's neck. He had never been held in such a way before. His colleagues were not on good terms with him, girls were too afraid of him, even his father didn't even want to touch him, and in the end avoided him as if he was Jinchuriki. Savoring the moment, he allowed himself to fall asleep. Kakashi snapped his head upwards. Now was not the time to feel pampered. He had to prove to the jounin that he made the correct choice and have no regrets in it. Removing himself from the futon, he found his discarded shinobi equipment next to the mattress. Wearing them and folding the mattress, he left the room. Leaving the spare bedroom and entered the living room, his eyes fell on the clock. It was past 9:30. This was the first time he had ever woken up any time after 5. Searching the room for the blonde, his eyes fell on the couch. To be precise, the slumbering figure on the couch. There was something wrong with the figure of the blonde on the couch. The shinobi was smaller, and the blonde hair was lighter than the jounin teacher. Plus there was a Fox ANBU mask on the black coffee table, and the ninja was garbed in standard ANBU uniform. Just then the blonde shinobi shifted and his face now faced Kakashi. Namikaze Minato. What was Konoha's prodigious ANBU captain doing, sleeping on a newly transferred shinobi's couch? Kakashi crept closer towards sleeping captain and studied the shinobi's face. The teen did have an uncanny resemblance to the jounin. Are they related in any way? The silver-haired boy pondered.